News Channel.
Good morning. Sir Keir Starmer faces a major revolt as the Sue Gray pay row rumbles on.
A civil war brews in Number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own.
This comes as Labour donor Lord Ellie funded at least 7 Labour cabinet ministers as well as the Prime Minister amid the freebie scandal.
Elsewhere, the Treasury is given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England. But the Chancellor is still expected to press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments for pensioners.
Offenders, including domestic abusers, are freed from prison without being electronically tagged. It's due to device and staff shortages. We're asking this morning, just how safe are our streets?
And former Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed is accused of multiple rapes by staff during their time working for the luxury London department store.
Trouble in the Middle East intensifies with warnings the Israeli ground invasion in Lebanon will lead to doomsday scenes and all-out war.
And the Institute of Economic Affairs claims a system of social insurance should replace a failing NHS. So we're asking, would abolishing the health service save lives?
And sport this morning, David Raya's spectacular double save earned Arsenal a point in Italy last night against Atalanta. Guess what? Emma Raducanu won again in Korea, and 90,000 people will fill Wembley Stadium tomorrow night for the first all-British heavyweight championship of the world in 30 years.
Good morning. A change to much more unsettled weather across southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force later on today. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Miriam Cates, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Now, Coity, you've had a busy few weeks, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Your daughter Ruby has headed off to university.
By the way, have you noticed that I'm not even glassy-eyed now? I'm beginning to get through this. I'm like...
How are you feeling? It's been tough.
Good. Yeah, no, it was awful at the weekend. The amount of people that have come up to me since we spoke about it, and I was speaking about it on the show on Monday, and they're going, oh, by the way, I know I feel your pain. I know exactly the same thing you're going through. But yeah, I haven't heard from her. I think she's having a good time.
She'll be having a great time.
But yeah, it's all good. It's all fine.
Did you have to take all of her stuff? Did you have to transport her?
Well,
did it all fit in the car?
I hired a bigger car.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
to get more stuff in, and then it was literally you know, there's have you seen these space saver things? You know, where they're like plastic. And then you put loads of clothes, and then you put the Hoover.
Oh, yeah, I've got loads of those.
And it pulls everything out. Unbelievable. So used lots of that.
Yeah.
And then so many gadgets and bits and pieces.
There's a story about that, isn't there?
That leads us on very nicely to a story in the Daily Mail this morning. So did you pack any gadgets for Ruby? What did you pack her?
Well, I think the university gadget of the year is the air fryer. Probably has been for a couple of years. Everybody has to have an air fryer. But the thing is, it's catered. So I'm like, well, why? Well, just in case. Well, my wife is just in case.
Late night snacks.
Air fryer. So there's that. There's a water filter. You know, one of those old Brita things that they're just. I think, well, why? Well,
for nice clean water, yeah.
But the thing is, how big are these places? I said, this is not a 4-bedroom house. How's everything going to go in here? It's just piles of stuff everywhere.
Well, apparently the must-have gadgets for students are the air fryer.
Yep, OK, that's number one, surely.
Yeah. And the second thing is a robot vacuum. You know, one of those vacuums that just goes off by itself.
Well, they're ridiculously expensive, aren't they, those things?
How luxury is that?
And how tiny is it?
They're only just little small rooms, aren't they?
What universities was it? Exeter?
I'm not sure. It doesn't
I'm showing my age because when I went to university, I got my first mobile phone and it was a Nokia brick. And I could have 10 texts before you had to delete them.
Oh, is that right?
Space, yeah.
Oh, so you got the Nokia. Yeah. I had a mini fridge in my room.
Yeah, that's it. We got a mini fridge as well.
A mini fridge. That is actually quite handy.
Yes,
your beverages and your milk.
And other beverages.
And other beverages may be available.
It was said, someone said, look, you're not supposed to take these things into the hall. So obviously nobody knows that we've done this. So
we have the
but
same rule.
Be
Yeah.
careful, because if you plug too many things in at the same time, it will short out the whole of the place. So if the whole thing goes down,
Put it all.
So is it-
Kettle, straighteners, air fryer.
Oh, I had a kettle in my room as well,
Yeah.
so I needed to have tea on the go.
yeah, of course.
Well,
yeah.
apparently...
Oh, yeah, and an espresso maker, a little espresso machine as well.
Oh,
I
she's
forgot
right.
about that in there as well.
She's well set up.
It's like you can open a cafe in her room.
Well, apparently, less than half of students who've gone to university this year can work an oven. They don't know how to work an oven, which leads into the
Maybe.
fact that they're all being gifted air fryers by their parents.
I have trouble with the air
Half
fryer
of...
thing.
Would Ruby know how to use an oven? I mean, that is shocking.
She's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, good,
An oven is fine, but I can't work the air
Can't
fryer.
take one of those in your
It's
car.
too many.
There's too many buttons.
Reminds me of my dad when he used to sit in the video machine. I'm like sitting here going, what is that?
Let us know if you have just sent off a daughter, a son or a grandchild off to university. What gadgets did you give them? Was an air fryer or a robot vacuum on the list? Apparently those are the must-have items, according to Daily Mail this morning. Right, thanks, Paul. We'll see you in a bit.
Yep.
Let's go to our top story now. A civil war has broken out in Westminster as the Prime Minister is forced to deny that he's lost control of government amid the Sue Gray row.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended himself after questions over Gray's £170,000 salary that reportedly exceeds his own.
While reports suggest that Sue Gray's wage was leaked in a deliberate attempt to damage her politically.
And this comes as Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has been given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England.
Despite this, reports suggest that the Chancellor will press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments. That's despite the major backlash.
And we're now joined by political commentator Claire Pearsall. Claire, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Trouble in number 10. Is this the beginning of a bad patch for Keir Starmer, or do you think he's going to ride it?
Well, it doesn't look great, does it? But I think what should be worrying him more than anything else is the amount of leaking that is coming out of number 10. It would seem that at the very top of the party, there is a lot of anger, there is a lot of unrest, and these stories are coming out into the media. And if you're not going to get a handle on those, if you're not going to be able to deal with them and have a strategy, then I think you're on a pretty much hiding to nothing. And I think that we can see more stories coming out across the weekend, and how he deals with this is going to be key to how his premiership continues.
In a sense, aren't we, Claire, that the honeymoon period is very much over within number 10? I mean, even the fact that we know Sue Gray's salary means that journalists have been briefed from inside number 10, and 77 days into his premiership, Sir Keir Starmer has been forced to come out and say, I'm completely in control. It's remarkable, isn't it?
The minute somebody has to say, I'm in control, don't worry about it, you should worry about it, because they aren't in control. This story has now been running across a few days. Nothing has been able to shut this down, and it comes on top of all of the scandal revolving around clothing and freebies being given. And it doesn't seem, there isn't a strategy in how to deal with it. And I find that the more concerning thing. If you've got a top team around you, you should be able to either shut these stories down, to put out some kind of message into the media that said, OK, here you go, here is the transparency you're after, and move on with business. But it just shows that this is a Labour government who have come in not understanding quite what their role is going to be, not understanding quite how difficult the role of government is. They've been in opposition for such a long time, and their comms around it are just appalling. So they need to get that tightened up. But it does seem as if there is a lot of arguing going on at the very top of Labour, and that is always going to destabilise a premiership.
I think, Claire, what's interesting about this scandal, if you want to call it that, is that it's not a political crisis in some ways. The government hasn't lost a vote. There's no foreign policy problem. There's no internal domestic policy problems here. This is all about vibes, really, and the problem that the Labour Party spent the last 5 years attacking Conservatives for exactly these kind of issues, issues that were more about judgment rather than actually breaking the rules. And now their chickens are coming home to roost. Do you think that the culture in politics has changed now so much that this is just what we've got to expect from here on in, that all the stories are going to be about behaviour rather than policy?
Well, I think it rather depends on what policy comes forward, because at the moment, the only policies that have come forward in the very few sitting days that we've had are pretty appalling in themselves. So you've got the bad press surrounding winter fuel allowance. You've got rumours in the budget that things like the 25% single person discount for council tax are going to go, or bus passes. So they're not getting a handle on what it is they want to put out there. I think we are going to see more of this. I think that politics these days is open to people more than it ever has been. But Labour ought to be very, very careful. The amount that they have slung at a former Conservative government for very similar offences, the amount of times that they took to their feet in outrage that somebody perhaps had a ticket for something. They need to be a little bit careful. They need to be a bit more circumspect, and they need to get their own house in order. And I think the first 77 days have shown them that the public aren't going to take kindly to certain things. They need to be much better controlled. And I think the row over Sue Gray is just a storm in a teacup. But surely somebody should have foreseen that that salary would come out. So there is a problem there. They haven't sorted it yet. I think they should. It's imperative that they have that kind of joined up feeling at the top, because otherwise your first 100 days are going to be marred with utter scandal.
And Claire, how would you advise, if you were advising Sir Keir Starmer, how to move ahead with this now? Because he's been defiant so far, hasn't he, in the face of criticism? And we've heard from Harriet Harman reportedly warning him to stop doubling down on all of this.
Yeah, it's never a good look to double down on things that have been given to you for free. Now, whether that be tickets, whether it be clothing or whatever, you need to be able to come out and say, OK, yes, this is what I've had. These are the people that have given it to me. I promised you change. I promised you transparency, and you lay it all out on the table. But you also need to look at all of your senior members of cabinet. What have they got coming up on their members' interests, which will be published in the next couple of months? I should imagine there'll be a new version. They need to understand quite who has taken what. And then Keir Starmer has to decide whether he advises his own members of his government to not accept gifts from anybody, or whether there is a limit. So he needs to really get a grip on what information is likely to come out, who has taken what. But I think Harriet Harman in this instance is right. You cannot double down when you're taking away £300 from pensioners. It's not a great look to have had £100,000 given to you basically since 2019.
Thank you so much, Claire. Appreciate your time. Moving on now. Elsewhere, some inmates have been released from prison without being electronically tagged amid a shortage of devices, prompting fears that it could pose a danger to the public.
Well, it's all part of the government's early release programme to combat overcrowding in jails.
Officials have declined to say how many of the 1,700 prisoners failed to receive ankle tags, despite it being a condition for their release.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Justice have placed the blame on the firm producing the tags and will apply financial penalties against them if necessary.
We're now joined by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
This is a very worrying story. Do you think this was just a mistake, or is there something more going on?
This was a rushed government policy to open the prison doors and let thousands of potentially dangerous criminals back out onto the streets. It comes as no surprise whatsoever that the company that supply and monitor these tags were ill prepared for this sudden rush of prisoners. And now we have a very undignified argument going on where everybody is pointing the blame at somebody else. The Ministry of Justice is blaming Serco, Serco's blaming the prisons are blaming others, and so this circus goes on. Very interestingly, the Prisons Minister, Lord Timpson, was due to meet with Serco yesterday afternoon, but there is a thundering silence about that meeting. We don't know what went on, we don't know what was said, and we don't know what the outcome is.
And Peter, at the heart of all of this is the survivors of these crimes, especially violent crimes and domestic abuse survivors. This is already a very worrying time for them, isn't it, if they hear that their abuser has been released early from prison. And then it just exacerbates that whole situation if you know that that abuser has not been electronically tagged.
The way that victims of crime are treated in this country is utterly appalling and is a huge stain on the tattered reputation of this nation. Picture the scene that you had the courage to finally come forward after perhaps years of domestic abuse at the hands of an absolute monster. And summoning that courage, you gave evidence and saw that person sent to jail, only for them to be released early, possibly without a tag and free, potentially, to offend again. It is absolutely shameful. A government's primary responsibility is to protect its citizens. And yet again, we see in our failing criminal justice system, whether that be the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts, the prisons, or the probation service, manifestly failing in their duty to protect us all.
The UK, well, England in particular, does have one of the highest rates of imprisonment across Europe, but considerably higher than the EU average. And sentences in this country have been getting longer, and violent crime has been going down. So completely take your point about what perhaps happens after prisoners are released, but isn't actually the UK doing quite a good job of locking people up when they're a danger to the public?
The UK is absolutely failing in its duty to protect its citizens. Look at the most recent statistics from the Crime Survey of England and Wales. Huge increases in virtually every type of crime. Speak to people who have the misfortune to be robbed, assaulted, or otherwise become victims of crime in our great cities, where the streets were surrendered some years ago by the police because they no longer patrol them, where villains act with impunity, where there is a plague of shoplifting, and quite frankly, crime is out of control. The streets are nowhere near as safe as they should be. The nation is sliding towards lawlessness, and meanwhile, we have rushed, ridiculous policies coming out of the government, and this is the result.
Peter, paint a picture, if you can, for us, of the practical implications when a violent offender does not have an electronic tag. I imagine it makes it difficult to locate them. It means you're not sure if they're actually sticking to their curfew. Do you think it will lead to some of these violent offenders reoffending?
Undoubtedly. We're already hearing stories of people who have been released from jail just a few days later committing further crimes. When a tag works effectively, it can be very precise in regards to the location where a prisoner can be ordered to stay. For example, if they're told to stay within their home, if they're fortunate enough to have a house to go to, then they quite literally could be in breach if they stray out into the garage, for example, or into the garden during their hours of curfew. They can be, when working properly, effective and precise. For a prisoner to come out of prison, released early, in all likelihood, having not confronted their offending, realised and appreciated the harm and damage that they've done, and to therefore not be rehabilitated in any way, shape or form, then to not have a tag and not have conditions imposed upon them is utterly reckless and potentially very dangerous.
OK, Peter Bleksley, as always, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. And just one example of what we've been talking about, reports in the papers this week about a Hollywood actor who was released from jail early under Sir Keir Starmer's scheme, the early release scheme. His name is Jason Hogerson. He has been put back behind bars just 48 hours after being released for allegedly slapping his ex-girlfriend. He was already, or he had just been serving, an 18-month sentence for assaulting that same ex-girlfriend.
Of course, one of the big problems underlying this is we just haven't built enough prison places over the last 10 years, and this is a consequence. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
The high street giant Next has warned of store closures after losing a £30 million legal battle over staff pay. It follows an employment tribunal that ruled the retailer must pay its store staff the same hourly rates as warehouse workers. Retail chains plans to appeal the ruling that saw over 3,500 former and current workers win their pay claim.
And professional footballer J. Emmanuel Thomas has been sacked from Greenock Morton FC after he was charged with attempting to smuggle £600,000 of drugs at Stansted Airport. The 33-year-old striker was arrested by National Crime Agency officers at his home near Glasgow. His lawyer has said he strenuously denies the allegations.
And Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture. Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. English identity under threat. He's saying this is down to the influx of migrants and the sneering attitude of the metropolitan establishment towards English identity. What do you make of what he's saying here?
Well, there's certainly an interesting point about English identity, because, of course, Scots has a very clear identity and they have their own parliament. Same with Welsh, same with Irish. And somehow English identity just doesn't get thought about or celebrated anywhere near as much. And sometimes, as I think Jenrick is correct in saying, people get looked down on for saying that they have an English culture or English identity. So I think there perhaps is something in that.
Do let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Do stay with us. Still to come, could the UK see severe thunderstorms over the next 24 hours? I hope not. Please stay tuned to get your latest weather update.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Now, a key part of the English identity is being obsessed about the weather. So what is the weather saying? Well, a thunderstorm warning has been issued across England and Wales with lightning and hail forecast for the next 2 days.
Oh, we just don't need it, do we? We really don't. Well, the first Met Office warning will come into effect from midday until 8 p.m, with thunderstorms expected to cause damage to buildings as well as power outages.
And we're now joined by senior meteorologist at the British Weather Services, Jim Dale. Jim,
Good
thanks
morning,
for joining
ladies.
us.
Morning.
You're welcome.
Are these
You're
thunderstorms, are they going to be severe as much as predicted, or is it being a bit over-egged?
Well, they're not here yet. We've got a pinprick over Belgium at the moment, a little shower. That's gonna move in our direction. So where we're going with this, it's probably going to take a good half day before we start to see the electrics. And I think to begin with, central southern England, where I'm located at the moment. But I think the main frame is going to be this afternoon into Wales and southwest England. That's where I think these severe thunderstorms could well occur. So yeah, the warnings are out there. I'm pleased to say we got our warnings out before the Met Office. Not that it's a race, but we did here. We could see them coming. So I guess this is the last of the summer wine because we've got 2 days of this. So tomorrow, and by the way, this does not include Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think you got a free hit here, guys, if you're listening from those areas or watching from those areas. It's basically England and Wales, and particularly I think the southwest and Wales today, but most of the country tomorrow. That's England and Wales tomorrow. So those are the sort of hit areas, and yet we're talking hail, we're talking gusty winds, we're talking downpours that could put flash floods into the situation. We're kind of, this is, we've been through a sedate period, high pressure, very welcome, call it last of the summer wine. And we're coming out of that now, and we've seen what's been going on in Europe this particular week, which I need to mention because, yeah, talking about gifts and dresses and what have you is all very nice and prim. But when we actually talk about what's actually important, we've had large parts of Europe underwater, not just underwater, and we're talking several feet underwater. This is climate change. This is what's going on, and not just in Europe, but also in Nigeria, in North Carolina, in the United States, estimated £7 billion worth of flood damage. So you see, the world's warming up, and sometimes we haven't got quite our eyes in the right place.
So thunderstorming is here this weekend, Jim. Would you say that after that it's officially coat season? Are we heading into winter?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think we get a day off on Monday, and then we really into looking out to the west in the Atlantic. And you're right, coat weather, brawly weather, if it can stand up in the winds. I think we're going to get autumnal. I think if you remember the very start of September, or the first week, we got that cold plunge that came down. I think we could well see another one of those coming in early doors. So yeah, it looks a little bit of a mess going forward, and we're going to have to watch our backs. As I've mentioned about Europe, yeah, most of this will be common weather, stuff that we can deal with. But we've got to be aware sea temperatures in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and other places are well in advance of where they should be. And there's your energy that goes into the atmosphere that can hold more water. So we might be talking beyond the floods of what we might well see today and tomorrow. More floods coming into the near future.
Jim, I joked at the beginning that we are obsessed with the weather in Britain, and we do love to talk about it. But do you think we are monitoring it much more closely than we ever used to? I remember when I was a child, and if it snowed, it just snowed and we got on with it. We didn't say, my goodness, this is early for this time of year, or is this a sign of climate change? Do you think the increased monitoring of the weather is actually making us more worried than we need to be?
Well, I think we need to monitor the weather, mainly because it's going in the wrong direction in terms of temperatures. The World Meteorological Organization came out yesterday to say that we'd actually breach 1.5, heading to 2.0. This is average global temperatures. Now, that doesn't sound a great deal, does it? But we're talking about where, this is the extremes added in, if you like, so the 40 degrees. So I think there's a degree of that. Look, when I was a kid, going to school in the snow and being dragged back by teachers holding hands and whatever. I remember it distinctly in the north of England. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I mean, I think the monitoring is now, perhaps more than it should be necessarily. In other words, we get that fed in, but for right reasons. And I think the right reasons are well ahead of us now in terms of what we're now seeing. And the time of climate denial is over. I need to make that absolutely clear. The evidence is clear. The evidence is irrefutable. We've got to get out of this pretense that the monitoring is fine and dandy, but it's actually the impacts that go on that we need to be aware of. And we live in a temperate world in the UK, so we're quite lucky in certain aspects. But there's other parts of the world, and sometimes, by the way, these impacts will visit us. These, this is all coming. So we just have to watch the space and keep talking about it. But the time for denial is over. The time for monitoring and keeping ourselves safe is the right things to do, which is what you've got to do today with the thunderstorms. An ordinary event until it isn't, but you know what you've got to do in thunderstorms. Don't put yourself in the wrong place on the ridge of hills or on open land. This type of thing. You're more or less safe in your house for the most part, or in your car. So do the right things when we get these severe weather things and keep yourself safe.
People just need to stay in and watch GB News. Jim Dale, thank you very much. Good to see you, as always.
And you, thank you.
Very quickly coming up to 6:30, it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. That's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's how you can make it yours.
Good luck.
And still to come, Paul Coit will be back to run you through all of last night's Champions League action. That's next. And this is GB News with Miriam and Ellie.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78 is closed southbound off the Eglinton interchange in Irvine after an accident. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way between Hermitage and Horver for an investigation. In Antrim, the A26 is closed each way along Frosses Road at Ballymoney after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. In Oxfordshire, the A44 is closed southbound along New Street at Chipping Norton Mop Fair. On the M25 in Kent, 2 lanes are closed clockwise at junction 5 for the M26 after an accident. 3 miles of queues back along the M26 towards there. And on the M25 in Surrey, there are 2 lanes closed clockwise just before junction 6 at Godstone, where a lorry caught fire with queues for around 2 miles towards there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I'm now joined by a truly inspirational man. He's an endurance runner, Ben Smith. 401 marathons in just 401 days for mental health and well-being. He was spurned on after being bullied as a child, was able to raise a whopping £250,000. I'm pleased to say that he joins me now. Right, so this was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
How long ago was it?
Well, we're coming up to, I think next year, roughly about 10 years since we started it. In 2026 will be 10 years since we finished.
So when did you run the marathons?
So it was between 2015 and 2016, over the course of 401 days, all around the UK.
What kind of madness was that?
Oh, it was an adventure, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, on day one when we started in Bristol, never ever thought that the project would ever become what it became. But over the course of the 401 days, we ran with 13,500 people within 8 miles of everywhere on the British mainland, from Land's End to John O'Groats. So,
and that was the journey from Land's End, John O'Groats?
Yeah. We covered so many different communities around the UK because I suppose the reason why I was doing it was to raise so much money for 2 anti-bullying charities that we wanted to include people in that. And yeah, I got to run in some amazing places.
I bet you did. What would you say is a beautiful place? I mean, the whole country, I love this country, but there are some outstanding, beautiful areas around. What would you say?
Oh, definitely.
Where's the best place that you run?
Well, I think I've got a few, but I think I would say probably the Highlands of Scotland.
I knew you would say someone like
that. Yeah, just the kind of vastness of it, the dramaticness of it. I remember running up and down one of the paths in the Highlands near Glencoe and coming face to face with a wild stag. So it was quite scary.
What did it do?
It did nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It was quite used to people because of the path.
What are you doing here? This is my house.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to GB News Breakfast. It's now time to go through all the latest sports news, and we have Paul with us to catch us up on the latest.
I'll try my best. I'll let you know. Thursday night Champions League. There was Thursday night Champions League, which is rare. But Atalanta, who are from Bergamo, by the way, in Italy, because I like to give a little...
Yes.
Geographical business. Arsenal nil, so Arsenal go over there 0-0. But I think the big talking point of it was David Raya, who's their goalkeeper, who made an amazing... I'd love to demonstrate it for you, but an amazing double save, one from a penalty, over one side, leaps over and makes a save. And so it stayed 0-0. Arsenal, not great. They were OK. It's still a point. First game of the Champions League, and as I've mentioned over the last couple of days, there's 8 games that they have to play in qualifying first. But Mikel Arteta, who still looks more and more like Captain Scarlet every time I see him, this is what he had to say after the game.
After the first 25 minutes, very inconsistent with the ball. We had moments, but we never got it into dominance or threat. And then we had a big chance for Guy Martinelli to win the game that unfortunately didn't go in. So a lot to improve.
Incredible black hair he's got, isn't it? Yeah, but anyway...
But looking down, like all the other managers, as we were saying yesterday.
Why do they do that? I don't know. And it's like, you know, every manager that we ever play, it's always like looking down, I'm not going to look anybody in the eye. I don't know. I really don't know. It's very bizarre.
Need some tips.
But is it a politician thing? Do they do that?
No, I
not really. Always in the eye, or...
Yeah. They obviously don't have a voice in their ear saying, look at camera 6, or...
Is that right? Yeah. Look straight in the eye. Let's talk about tennis. So, Ellie, you like Emma, don't you? Emma Raducanu.
And I've said, haven't I, before, she's got it in her. We're writing her off too soon.
Sure.
Because I know that Eamon's not much of a fan.
Eamon really goes to town.
She's a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
But I think she's great, and she's doing well.
Yeah, she's only 21 for
Yeah.
crying out loud. It seems like she's been around since Virginia Wade was, you know, she's been around for so long, since she won the US Open. So she's reached the quarterfinal. And you know what? And I like to keep up on Raducanu so we can keep up with what's going on. So she's playing in the Korean Open. I don't know where the Korean Open is when it comes to the big tournaments, but she seems to play well in Asia for some reason. She beat China's Yuan, who... she beat her in straight sets, who's 40th in the world. Where do you think Raducanu is in the world, do you think? Her world rank?
150.
70 now.
Oh, that's not
70?
too bad.
Yeah, she's 70.
She's on the up.
Yeah.
It's a bit more tennis as well, the Laver Cup.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm still it's probably my age. I'm slightly older because I'm 34 now, and remember the days of McEnroe.
All those early mornings.
Exactly, that's what it is. I remember the days of McEnroe and Borg, and I love the fact that in the Laver Cup, it's kind of like the Ryder Cup of tennis. So we've got the rest of the world, although it's not America, although most of them are American, against Europe. So you've got Bjorn Borg, who is the manager or the coach of the European side, and John McEnroe, who is the coach of the rest of the world. It's the last time they're doing this. So it's being held in Berlin, and even there was the old needle, bit of stuff between them, although they're great friends. Have a look at this. This is McEnroe and Borg. A couple of days.
Maybe one more time for us, just one more. Where am I sitting?
We have a good chance. We always have a good chance. Like John said, it's been so good tennis, very close matches, but I think it's time for Europe to win in Berlin. Cannot be better.
Win in Berlin. It almost sounds like it rhymes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we have some guys that are hot. You know, Taylor, first time, he got to a U.S. Open final. That's huge for American. And Francis. Ben Shelton's going to be a superstar, I believe, but they're also playing superstars already. Carlos Alcaraz, I love Carlos, I have to admit. I hope he plays horribly this weekend. But generally, he's the biggest breath of fresh air we've had in the sport in 10 years, I got to be honest. And Zverev playing in his home country, and Medvedev, wanting to do his thing. And right from the top, that's a pretty strong first 3 guys.
It was a bit of a brat in his day, wasn't he? But I love McEnroe. I've always loved John McEnroe. Very quick one about that is that there's a documentary, I don't know if you've seen that on Sky, all about John McEnroe and his life. And anyway, it was made by a guy who was a Tottenham Hotspur fan. And there you go. So anyway, and what they did at the end, the whole crew so then they presented John with a Spurs shirt at the end of the whole filming. So I'm kind of hoping that McEnroe is a Spurs guy now. But I don't know.
In turn, a big fan of yours as well, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Paul, thank you very much.
This weekend, Laver Cup.
Yeah, great.
Brilliant.
Let's have a look at the weather now with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday. So quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west, it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin.
Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all.
Really?
It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is A Night With. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in
Quite
London.
a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Let's take a look at some of the newspaper front pages for you now. And the Daily Mail leads with Robert Jenrick's warning: mass immigration and woke culture have put English identity under threat.
And The Times is reporting that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is facing increasing pressure to reverse cuts as the Bank of England provides the Labour government with a £10 billion budget boost.
The Daily Express headlines: I survived atomic bomb tests and cancer, but will I survive this winter? An RAF veteran shares his concerns amid the winter fuel cuts.
And the iPaper reports the Middle East steps closer to a regional war as Hezbollah threatens to retaliate following Israel bombing southern Lebanon.
And finally, the Daily Mirror leads to the Al Fayed rape scandal as 20 women allege they were assaulted by the late Harrods boss.
Now, joining us now in the studio to discuss the headlines and what's making the news, we have former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Reddrop, and former political editor of the LBC, Theo Usherwood. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now, the black hole, which seems to have become less of a hole overnight thanks to these new forecasts. Rachel Reeves, will she renege on her commitment to cutting the fuel allowance, or will she hold firm?
Well, I think, she's rolled the pitch over the whole Labour government have rolled the pitch of kind of, misery and black holes and tough choices. And I think in some ways this kind of little bit of room that she may be given is probably quite frustrating for her to read in the pages this morning. I think it's unlikely. I think they've set the narrative, they've set the tone. They have, I think, quite strategically pointed every single government department saying, oh, it's 10 times worse than we ever thought it would be, which is the kind of politically skillful thing to do. It's all interlinked, though, and I think the more, when you look at the Express front page around that RAF veteran Jack Barlow, cancer survivor, the atomic bomb, around the atomic bomb tests, we'll see more and more of these testimonies. I think you guys probably getting tons of emails and, texts and online comments around the winter fuel payments, but despite this headroom, I think they're on course, and I don't think there's going to be a lot to change that.
It's going to be harder and harder, though, for this Labour government to justify the winter fuel cuts, because when we talk about this £22 billion black hole and we talk about tough decisions that need to be made, which is this rhetoric that's being peddled out at the moment, we do need to remind ourselves that of that £22 billion, almost half was the public sector pay rises, and some may argue that was needed, some may say it wasn't. But that was a political choice, and now we're hearing about this £10 billion boost from the Bank of England.
It was a political choice, yes, and of course the argument from Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves was that in order to get the country working, whether it be the railways or the NHS, so that people can go about their lives and actually contribute to the economy in terms of being able to do their jobs properly and paying their taxes, it was necessary to provide these pay rises to the train drivers, to NHS workers, to teachers, so that the country could continue to function. Of course, that we could see those pay rises go higher still. There've already been some warnings, some sounding off from noises off from some of the trade unions that they would like higher pay rises in the coming years, and that's something, obviously, that's a problem that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer will have to deal with at that particular time. I think more worrying for Number 10 when you look at the front pages, when they look at the front pages today, top half of the Daily Mail, Keir Starmer on the rack. I'm in complete control. I'm completely in control, says Starmer over the Sue Gray salary row. She's getting £170,000. At the same time, Keir Starmer is defending, the fact that he can't stay in can't watch his beloved Arsenal in the stands and has to go to the corporate box because of security. If he's asking us to tighten our belts, the choice isn't between being in the stands and being in corporate hospitality. The choice is between being in the stands and taking out a Sky Sports package and watching it at home. These are the tough choices that your viewers at GB News are going to have to be making over the coming weeks and months, given what we've heard is going to be in the budget.
But the Chancellor's argument will be that, yes, it's a good thing to have an additional £10 billion, but actually we're facing in just 50 years' time unbelievable budget deficits, 400% debt to GDP ratio. Shouldn't she just bank the £10 billion as part of her commitment to being fiscally responsible?
I think that in probably make economic sense, but I think the distraction that Theo's been hinting at in terms of those front pages, and having been in number 10, it can be quite, it's almost quite submarine-like, and you can kind of become quite disorientating in terms of priorities and what's right. I really think the narrative, the budget and conference for the Labour Party, they'll just be trying to scrape through to get into that, and I really think the narrative is set. I mean, we talked about, and the Labour Party, on their economic policy before the election talked about going for growth and all this, but there's been zero meat on the bone on that whatsoever, and kind of, fiscal responsibility, tough choices, and, this kind of tantalising growth that they've teased out. I've seen no strategies yet as to how they get there.
Yeah.
I've seen nothing.
It's less about policy at the moment and more about optics.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what's so... The issues itself around Sue Gray and Keir Starmer taking these freebies, I don't think is actually particularly interesting. What's interesting moving forward is how Starmer his lack of fleet of footness and how he's been able to handle this. The kitchen's not that hot yet. He will have to deal with controversies and, scandal and real substantive policy problems far more difficult than this. And if this is causing him this much trouble, that's not a good sign moving ahead.
These are problems of his own making.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So this is, to Oscar's point, when things really start to heat up is when you're having to deal with problems in number 10 and across government, which aren't of your own making. You've got to respond really quickly. And, in terms of how Keir Starmer should be dealing with the row about Sue Gray and his freebies, he should be shutting it down, and he should be showing the ability to shut it down really quickly, and he's not able to do that. And the danger is, and Oscar will be able to perhaps speak to this better than I will, but that once the narrative's set, and if you end up on a downward trajectory, it's very hard to turn it around. It's very hard to get back onto that front foot, to start to talk about the things that you want to talk about. If every time these were local radio interviews, and he's getting absolutely skewered, and it shouldn't be the case.
Isn't this really almost a mirror image of what happened to Boris Johnson? It started with a few errors of judgment, the Labour Party jumped on it, the media jumped on it, and it became this kind of unstoppable train that eventually resulted in his downfall. Do you think we could have started on something like that already?
It remains to be seen. I think the part of the problem for Starmer is that actually he came into office promising something different.
Yeah.
So if you go back to that speech on the steps of number 10, he was talking about public service, change, bringing integrity back into government after the Conservatives, and I think that's where he is, and that's where he is going to receive particularly harsh treatment, because he's set out his stall as someone who is going to do things differently, and if he can't do that from the outset, then there are questions as to what he is there for, because he was quite clear. Certainly, there was differentiation in the election campaign, granted, but before the election campaign, as we all knew a general election was going to happen this year, there was, he was saying, I'm actually very close to the Conservatives on policy matters. That's why the Tories came up with the Rwanda scheme. But actually the change that he was promising, the difference he was promising, was that he was going to be a Prime Minister who would bring in competence, who would bring in integrity to government. And now we have these daily, negative headlines.
Yeah. Oscar, we've only got a minute left, but I want to get onto this story. Robert Jenrick saying English identity is under threat.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Tory leadership, and it's funny when you actually see the front page itself, this is brilliant. He couldn't have asked for better placement in terms of the story, where he's got Starmer up top, and then, his, as he would see, I'm the future of the party, leader of the opposition on the bottom half. There's a lot of momentum, I think, with Rob, and I think this piece on, mass migration and kind of, wokeism that has diluted, as he sees it, British society, is a really, really... He's very comfortable riding those kind of horses, I think. Conference is coming up for the Conservative Party. It'll be really, really interesting to see who holds the room. We're not, and obviously I'm a bit biased, but we're not going to see queues around the block like we did for Boris. I don't think any of them quite have that star quality immediately. But, Rob talks to the party, I think, very, very sensibly at the moment, and there's a lot of momentum for Rob.
And talks to many would-be Tory voters based on the views that we have in front of us. We'll share them at the top of the hour. Oscar, Theo, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at your weather now with Annie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday, so quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west, it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78 is closed southbound from the Eglinton interchange to the A71 Warwicks interchange at Irvine for an investigation. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way between Hermitage and Hock of Ur after an accident. In Antrim, the A26 is closed along Frosses Road in Ballymoney after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. On the M25 in Kent, there are clockwise delays towards Junction 5, where the M26 joins after an accident. Queues too back along the M26 towards there. On the M25 in Surrey, it's down to a single lane clockwise where a lorry caught fire just before Junction 6 at Godstone, causing queues from just after the Clackett Lane services. And buses replaced trains between Gunners Lake and Calstock for engineering works between Liscard and Loo because of flooding.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is your...
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Sir Keir Starmer faces a major revolt as the Sue Gray pay row rumbles on.
A civil war brews in Number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own.
Well, this comes as Labour donor Lord Alley funded at least 7 Labour cabinet ministers as well as the Prime Minister amid the freebie scandal.
Elsewhere, the Treasury is given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England. But the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is still expected to press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments for pensioners.
Offenders, including domestic abusers, are freed from prison without being electronically tagged. due to device and staff shortages. So we're asking this morning, just how safe are our streets?
Former Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed has been accused of multiple rapes by staff during their time working at Harrods, the luxury department store.
Trouble in the Middle East intensifies, with warnings the Israeli ground invasion in Lebanon will lead to doomsday scenes and all-out war.
And the Institute of Economic Affairs claims a system of social insurance should replace a failing NHS. So we're asking, would abolishing the health service save lives?
And the sport this morning, David Raya's spectacular double save earned Arsenal a point in Italy last night against Atalanta. Emma Raducanu wins again in Korea, and 90,000 people will fill Wembley Stadium tomorrow night for the first all-British heavyweight championship of the world in 30 years.
Good morning. A change to much more unsettled weather across southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force later on today. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 7. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Miriam Cates, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Thank you so much for your company. We were talking about gadgets, must-have gadgets if you've just sent your child or your grandchild off to university. Apparently it's the air fryer.
Yep.
And what was the other one? Robot vacuum.
Hoover.
Yeah.
Very expensive. Although impressive that students want clean carpets.
Yeah, no, that is. I want one now.
I'm
They're
sorry,
quite expensive.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that a student already with... They're really expensive, these things,
Yeah,
aren't
like
they?
350 quid.
I mean, really?
And most student rooms are tiny. I mean, you hardly need a Hoover at all. But
I know. It's madness. And most, if it was my daughter's, you wouldn't even see the carpet because of all the clothes around there anyway.
Well,
so there'd be no room for it anyway.
Apparently, half of students don't actually know how to work a traditional oven. That's why they're being given an air fryer. It's remarkable, really. Paul's been in touch saying the most important gadget is a corkscrew and a tin opener. Very true. And I said a bottle opener as well. Also very, very important. We're also talking about Robert Jenrick, who's on the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, saying that English identity is under threat, he says, due to mass immigration and the metropolitan attitude towards English identities. Yes. A sneering attitude, doesn't he?
Yes, and JM has said, finally, Robert Jenrick is reading the room. About time, good for him. And I think lots of viewers will recognise the sentiment. Is he making a pitch for reform voters? Obviously, that's a key thing that the Conservatives have got to do. Someone else says, finally, someone speaking up for people with concerns about how mass immigration is affecting this country, obviously culturally as well as economically.
Yeah, Elaine says English identity is just not allowed anymore. And on Rishi Sunak, not Rishi Sunak, on Sir Keir Starmer, sorry, still getting used to that. Sean says, the worst Prime Minister in my lifetime, he's a traitor and he's way out of his depth.
It's astonishing how quickly the honeymoon period is over, isn't it? If you think back to Prime Ministers like Tony Blair or even Boris Johnson, they had quite a long period of good poll ratings after the election, but this is a very, very sharp fall.
Well, you'd say with Sir Keir Starmer, it actually was in the first week, wasn't it, with the riots and just how quickly that all happened after the Labour government came into power. So there hasn't really been a honeymoon period.
No.
But now we have this revolt, as it's been described in the papers, which you could say is Sir Keir Starmer's own making. Let us know what you think. Do keep those views coming in, gbnews.com/yoursay. And do let us know what you think about Robert Jenrick's comments as well. Do you think English identity is under threat? He's certainly tapped into a sense of feeling with you. So do keep those views coming in, gbnews.com/yoursay. Now, as we've been saying, a civil war has broken out in Westminster as the Prime Minister is forced to deny that he has lost control of government amid the Sue Gray row.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended himself after questions over Gray's £170,000 salary that reportedly exceeds his own.
Well, reports suggest that Sue Gray's wage was leaked in a deliberate attempt to damage her politically.
And this comes as Rachel Reeves has been given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England.
Despite this, reports suggest that the Chancellor will press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments. That's despite the major backlash.
We're now joined in the studio by political commentator Tom Slater. Tom, welcome to the show.
Morning.
Just been talking about how quickly Keir Starmer's star has fallen.
No, exactly. I mean, to the extent it was ever that high to begin with, I think is an open question. It was a loveless landslide, as we know. Just over 30% of the vote share. You know, when you take the turnout into the equation, I think someone worked out about 20% of the electorate actually voted for this government. So maybe it's not that surprising that things have hit the skids so quickly. But aside from anything else, he's really terrible at politics. Now, I know there hasn't been a kind of glittering array of political stars in recent years, but when you find yourself in front of a TV camera saying, "I am in control," you've messed up. I mean, only someone who is out of control would say that. And I think the other thing that Labour are really running into is over the course of the past few years, they've engaged in this over-the-top politics of kind of outrage and pearl-clutching where anything the Conservatives do. If you listen to them, you would think that no politician had ever lied before Boris Johnson, that no politician had ever gone on a holiday paid for by someone else. And it's not to say that any of these things are good, but it's just to say that now that they're in government and they're engaging in many of the same behaviours, they're getting caught out by it. And I do worry about the people who seem to be either too young or naive enough to think that the party of Labour of Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson would bring an end to backstabbing and leaking and muckiness at the top of politics. This is politicians reverting to type
and taking gifts from the rich and famous. I mean, that's not a new thing.
Mandelson was barely ever on dry land. He was also on the yachts back in the day, so I don't understand.
There's a really interesting point about this kind of increasing levels of scrutiny and increasing levels of outrage when people don't appear to stand up to that scrutiny. If we go back to former politicians like Churchill, people who are seen as national heroes, they faced no such scrutiny, and yet were seen as colourful characters, good leaders. Are we ever going to get back there?
I think there's a big problem, as we were talking about in the break, of the fact that because there is this extra level of scrutiny, there's this offence archaeology, that any politician of some colour, character, someone of a bit of substance, they could easily be weeded out. And I think if you look at the last two Prime Ministers we've had, in the form of Starmer currently and Sunak before, neither of them are life's great showmen, shall we say, nor have they got, to be honest, a hell of a lot of political substance to them. And I think that's one thing which, if Starmer had a really clear programme and vision for the country, if he was like, this is where we're going, if he had the country behind him, things like this, while important, would kind of bounce off him because people would have a clear sense of the mission, they were bought into it. In the absence of that, these kinds of scandals can dog you to a much greater degree than they otherwise would.
And all of these front pages, all of these stories in the past few days, it does paint a picture, doesn't it, of a fractious relationship at the very heart of government already, just 77 days into Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. As you say, having to come out and say, I'm completely in control, is a remarkable thing to say after just 3 months at the helm. And it also suggests, doesn't it, that there are people within the government who are willing to brief against the head of staff, Sue Gray. The honeymoon period is over.
No, absolutely. And it started so early as well. If you remember all of those reports that were coming out about the kind of turf wars between Sue Gray and Morgan McSweeney, who's kind of Starmer's right-hand man, claims that she was quite passive-aggressively moving McSweeney's desk further and further away from Keir Starmer's office. How much of this is true, how much of this is spin, we don't really know. But the fact that that started almost as soon as they were in government, I think, again, it gives the lie to this idea that what we've seen in recent years from the Conservatives in terms of the infighting, in terms of the power around advisers like Dominic Cummings, this stuff, particularly since New Labour, has kind of been the norm. You can disagree with that, you can think it's a bit mucky, you can think that there's too much of a role for unelected advisers and so on. All of that I completely understand. But because they have pretended like this was brand new, an expression of just sort of Tory corruption and so on, they're finding themselves found out very quickly as a consequence of all that.
I think perhaps what viewers will be concerned about is that while politicians and their advisers are taken up with these continuous headlines about behaviour and judgment, are they focusing on the right decisions for the country? And this black hole, this Rachel Reeves decision is clear that this is going to be part of this whole political row. If she, perhaps, it could be argued, she should be saving that money. We're facing huge budget deficits in years to come. And yet the political pressure is such that she probably can't make those decisions for the long term.
No, absolutely, because on the one hand, you could kind of admire her for sticking to her guns up until this point. But I think the problem for Labour is that this wasn't part of a kind of broader argument as to why this is important and why this is clear to where we're going. To be honest, personally, I think that it was unjustified rescinding these winter fuel payments. But at the same time, you would try and fold it into a narrative. We're all in this together. Yeah. We need to weather the storm. We've got to make tough decisions. They have tried to do that, but they haven't done that with a kind of sunlit uplands in view. It was Keir Starmer's speech a few weeks ago saying things are going to get worse before they get better. That's not how you get people on board for these kinds of things, you know.
Yeah, very true.
Tom Sater, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, elsewhere, Yvette Cooper has announced that domestic abuse specialists will work in 999 control rooms under a new law. The Home Secretary also announced emergency restraining orders to give victims greater protection. This is what she had to say.
Victims of domestic abuse need to know that the police will be there for them in an emergency. That didn't happen for Rani Muda when she lost her life, and that's why we're bringing domestic abuse experts into 999 control rooms like this to make sure that the emergency response is right. We saw when Rani Muda called 999 4 times on the night she was killed, no one came. We cannot let that happen again. So we'll begin with the first wave, then we want to roll this out right across the country, so that domestic abuse victims can know the police will be there for them when they call.
Now, this comes as some inmates have been released from prison without being electronically tagged amid a shortage of devices, prompting fears that it could pose a danger to the public.
Well, it's all part of the government's early release programme to combat overcrowding in jails. I think we're meant to be going to a SOT here, are we? No, we're not. OK. Well, let's move on, shall we, to another very, very serious story. The former Harrods boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, has been dubbed a monster with no moral compass. That was after it was revealed that he allegedly raped 5 women.
Let's take a listen to an excerpt from the BBC documentary.
He had come upstairs into my room. I was absolutely terrified. Got into bed with me. He was trying to kiss me and push himself on me. And I don't know how I did it. I just kicked him off. I kicked and screamed. And again, I got him off. I was just terrified. I said, I just want to go to sleep on my own. Mr. Fayed, I don't want to, Mr. Fayed. And he kept saying, relax, please relax. Like, how can you relax when you're in that situation? The lawyers organised for a shredding truck to come to my lawyer's office. It was shredded in front of us, including tapes I had of him on my phone that had messages and voicemails, really quite nasty voicemails on them.
Well, according to the documentary, Harrods, the luxury department store, helped to cover up the abuse allegations.
And that's as the current owners of Harrods has said they are utterly appalled by the revelations and have issued an apology.
Well, let's speak now to former detective and Rochdale sex abuse ring whistleblower, Maggie Oliver, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning, Maggie. And these are shocking and very serious allegations, aren't they? It's distressing, actually, to listen to that clip that we just shared from that documentary.
I think you're right in that, Ellie, but I think what, to me, is perhaps even more shocking is that I'm not that shocked. I think wherever you turn, where you see power and money and control, you have predatory men. And Mohammed Al-Fayed is the latest in a long line of predatory men who have used their influence, wealth and power to groom and sexually abuse vulnerable women. And vulnerability comes in many different forms, whether it's a child victim of the grooming gang, or whether it's a victim of Jimmy Savile, or Harvey Weinstein, whose victims were wanting to get on in their own career. The women in this particular case, for me, were vulnerable for other reasons. He was their boss. They would lose their job. Where do they turn with these allegations? And I think the powerlessness of the victims is what repeatedly shocks me. I don't know more than is in the public arena with this case, to be honest, Ellie. But I do know that numerous victims did report to the police. The question has to be, why were those reports of rape and attempted rape not taken more seriously? And why was he allowed to continue to abuse in this way for many, many years?
And I think, Maggie, we've become sadly, shockingly used to these historic sex scandals coming out from perhaps the 70s. But this is much more recent. We're talking the most recent allegation just 14 years ago. Have things really changed? Are women more able to report this kind of abuse now than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago?
I think I would really push back on that, Miriam, because, I've started my own charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and we support victims every single day who are being raped and abused today. And the shocking thing is that, a great deal of the work that we do in the foundation is supporting women and men, actually, who come to us having reported to the police and having had their cases closed down, not thoroughly investigated. There are so many factors that feed into this. But what I see still, and have seen for many years now, is a defensiveness to protect the organisation, whether that's the police, whether that's Harrods, whether it's the BBC with the Jimmy Savile scandal. What is the overriding priority is to protect the organisation at all costs. And these organisations are wealthy and they pay off anybody who raises their head above the parapet. They threaten them, they intimidate them. You heard a lady there saying she had to have all her correspondence destroyed. That lady may have already gone to the police and realised that her allegations of attempted rape were not going to be taken seriously, and she felt she had no other alternative. So we need to look at the structures. We need to look at why, people around Mohammed Al Fayed, all those employees around him, many of the staff in Harrods would have been fully aware of his behaviour. We have to somehow encourage an atmosphere where people can speak out. And that's the way to prevent these sexual predators from being allowed to continue for decades and destroying so many lives in the process. Why does this continue to happen? Why are these allegations not taken seriously? And I think there's a whole list of different factors that feed into that, not least of which are lawyers who were paid incredible amounts of money to cover up these things. We need to have a real overhaul, not only of policing, of the criminal justice system, but the whole way that rape, sexual abuse is dealt with. And call me cynical, but I've just heard Yvette Cooper talking about having domestic violence experts in policing control rooms. That's great, but if you've not got the police officers there to respond to those calls and who are adequately trained to deal with them effectively, it's just another empty promise that actually will not bring about change. So, forgive me, but I am extremely cynical. I hear these words all the time. This is the latest scandal in a long line, and we keep hearing the same platitudes and apologies from the current Harrods bosses. Have things changed there now? I don't know. Are there victims being failed every single day? Yes, there are. Is it any different than it was 20 years ago? No, it's not. And that's why I get so angry when I hear yet another story and so many lives destroyed by people turning a blind eye and pretending there isn't a problem. There really, really is.
OK, Maggie Oliver, thank you very much for your thoughts. Well, a spokesperson for Harrods has given us this statement. The Harrods of today is a very different organisation to the one owned and controlled by Mohammed Al Fayed between 1985 and 2010. It is one that seeks to put the welfare of our employees at the heart of everything that we do.
Now, let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Tensions in the Middle East continue to intensify as the IDF carried out hundreds of strikes in southern Lebanon yesterday. It comes days after the pager and walkie-talkie explosions in Beirut that the leader of Hezbollah said could be called a declaration of war.
High street giant Next has warned of store closures after losing a £30 million legal battle over staff pay. It follows an employment tribunal that ruled the retailer must pay its store staff the same hourly rates as warehouse workers. The retail chain plans to appeal that ruling that saw over 3,500 former and current workers win their pay claim.
Tory party leader hopeful Robert Jenrick has warned that English identity is under threat. He claims that the ties that bind the nation together are beginning to fray due to mass immigration and woke culture.
And now it's time for your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday. So quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now it's time for our Great British giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. That's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need for a chance to make it yours.
And good luck.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, a leading think tank has suggested that the NHS should be replaced with a social insurance system modelled on countries like the Netherlands.
The Institute of Economic Affairs revealed that Britain has the highest level of deaths that could have been avoided if the country used a different health system.
So, this morning, we're asking, would abolishing the NHS save lives? Well, let's speak now to political commentator Jess Gill. Jess, what do you make of this?
Thanks for having me on. For one, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the NHS is still existing for so long, considering the fact that it's not helping doctors, it's not helping nurses, considering the fact that the average patient gets a really bad deal with the NHS, considering the fact that the taxpayer has to pay so much into the black hole that is the NHS, and they still don't get enough out of it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous the NHS is still continuing, and it has this sacred cow mentality around it, this cult mentality around it. And I think, quite frankly, it has to be abolished if we want to save lives.
But Jess, for understandable reasons, people in this country are very, perhaps not proud of the NHS anymore. I think that was dented by COVID, but certainly appreciative of the fact that the NHS is free at the point of delivery. Could you see any political context in which that could be changed?
Well, to that I say, what's the point of it being free at the point of use when nobody can get around to using it because of the long waiting lists? I mean, at the end of the day, again, the quality of service isn't that good compared to other OECD countries. It's constantly failing the British people. Like, one statistic is more than 250 patients per week could be dying because of unnecessary results of long waiting times. And also the fact that now more and more Britons are using other measures other than A&E to treat illnesses and injuries instead of relying on the healthcare system. Healthcare shouldn't be a privilege, but because of the NHS making it a ration system, it is becoming a privilege. And I think just because we might move to, well, hopefully we could move to a more privatised system, that doesn't mean we're going to move to America's system. The American system, for one, isn't a privatised system. There's a lot of government interference with the US system. There's a lot of regulation which makes the prices incredibly high. And two, there are other models than that. Look at the Scandinavian models, look at Germany, look at Singapore, look at most other countries, because they do not have a system like the NHS.
I mean, there's no denying, is there, Jess, that the NHS needs to reform. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been very, very clear about that. But you touch on the American system, and we look at healthcare systems around the world. The NHS, more so in the past, I'll give it to you, has been the envy of the world. But it is respected, isn't it, for the standard of care within the NHS. Once you are there, once you're receiving care, it will be the very best of healthcare that there is in the world.
I'm not necessarily sure that's true. Again, just from anecdotal experiences, it's hard to find people who've had a good experience with the NHS, especially when talking to old people and elderly people. In fact, I think it's a very complicated system for them, not just to get help, but also throughout help to raise their concerns and raise their voices if the treatment is below quality. Because a lot of the time, the staff are overworked and can't give that service. And also, we have fewer medical technology than other OECD countries, and that shows in the performance of it. I remember one report that Christian Niemitz created from the Institute of Economic Affairs, where he was talking about the title of a Guardian article that said the NHS is good for anything other than saving lives, except saving lives. And if that's not what a healthcare system is meant to do.
So Jess,
then what's the point?
I think nobody in this country would want to go to the American system, where instead of there being a lot of waste like there is here, there's just a lot of profit for the insurance companies, and that's where all the money goes. So what are the better systems? Which countries do you think we should look at if we were to remodel our health system?
Yeah, like I said, there are several different models which have a half and half system. A lot of these models ensure that patients receive some sort of care. Singapore, for example, patients have to put money into a private system. And so when they have an issue with their healthcare, they can then, use that money to go to one of the privatized systems, privatized companies, and receive healthcare from that. And that utilizes the free markets. And for those who can't afford it, then they have some sort of Medicare and Medicaid provision to ensure that the poorest of society can still receive healthcare. Even something like that, which isn't radically free market, would be so much better than the NHS. And that's a compromise. As a radical free marketeer, I'd be willing to make.
Now, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter, Dr. Bharat Pankhania. Good to see you this morning, Doctor. What do you make of this? Should we abolish the NHS in order to save lives?
No, I think, and abolish is a very big emotive word. If you look at a recent report from the King's Fund, which is quite an authoritative body, it shows to us that no one system is perfect in the world. Of course, the NHS needs reform, but what I want to say is we are complaining about the NHS and we use emotive words like abolish it because of where we are at. And we are at underfunding compared to our European partners. We have fewer doctors per 1,000 people. We have fewer hospitals. We have fewer hospital beds. And as a result, we underperform. Now, you could also argue with me that this is not a bottomless pit. And I agree with you that we haven't got a bottomless pit of money. However, the NHS model in the UK works very well. And if we were to invest in primary care, what I mean by primary care is general practice and all those preventative medicines like public health, then we would have a less ill population, and then our money will go a lot further if only we would do the right things in the right order.
But aren't the problems with the NHS model twofold? Firstly, that there is only one source of money, the taxpayer, so it is impossible to keep putting that amount up and up and up. But also, when it is always free at the point of use, there isn't really the incentive to look after your health in the way that there might be if the cost of your insurance was dependent on how well you looked after yourself, whether you're a healthy weight, whether you didn't drink or smoke. However you live, whatever your lifestyle, the NHS will look after you for free. Do we not need to introduce some sort of link between behaviour and price of healthcare?
Well, we already do, as we know that the sugar tax has made a considerable improvement on the consumption of carbohydrates in drinks. Then we've got smoking, and we've got campaigns on better health. However, you see, what you're saying is that there is an incentive if you have to pay for it. The trouble is, people who can pay will pay and they will have their care. A large number of people who are also at the margins of society, they're poor, they're also disengaged. They are the ones who have the poor diet because of poverty, and it is an extra burden to say, and on top of this, we expect you to pay an insurance for your health.
Dr. Bharat Pankhania and Jess Gill, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Now, still to come, Paul Coit will be here with all of our sport. That's next. This is GB News with Miriam and Ellie.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78 is closed southbound from the Eglinton interchange to the A71 at the Warwicks interchange at Irvine for an investigation. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way between Hermitage and Hock of Ur after an accident. In Antrim, the A26 is closed each way along Frosses Road in Ballymoney after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident overnight. On the M25 in Surrey, lorry. It's down to a single lane clockwise where a lorry caught fire just before junction 6 at Godstone. There are queues from junction 5 with queues back along the M26 towards the M25, not helped by roadworks. And buses replaced trains again today between Calstock and Gunnislake for emergency engineering work. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
Your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We're going through the sport now with Paul Coyte. Morning, Paul.
Good morning.
And should we start with the all-British world heavyweight title fight, the first one in 30 years?
Yes, very good.
And I knew that.
And do you know who the last one was? I know you know. It was Lennox Lewis and it was Frank Bruno.
Exactly that, yeah.
I know you remember that. Well, you're far too young to remember.
So where's this taking place?
It's happening at Wembley Stadium. So 90,000 people will be watching this fight. And that's the thing, if you go to boxing and if you go and watch it in a big stadium like that, then you can't really see much. You find yourself looking at the screen. Now, this is the weigh-in. This was at Guildhall in the city yesterday. So the thing is, what they've done is tried to choose the most lavish, beautiful room that they could possibly find, which is the Grand Hall at Guildhall.
Looks great.
In the city, which is just an amazing place. So there we are. There's AJ. That's Anthony Joshua, formerly two-time world champion. So he lost twice to Alexander Usyk, who Daniel Dubois fought just about a year ago and nearly beat him. Now, Usyk is the undisputed world champion, and Daniel Dubois hit him, but although it was a slightly low blow. So what the referee did is actually said, hang on, it's a low blow, it doesn't count. So it gave him a lot more time to recover, and then Usyk came back and beat him. So they're both British. Daniel Dubois there on the right, and there's Anthony Joshua there on the left-hand side. And the interest in this fight is incredible.
Why is he wearing an AirPod at a news conference?
You know what? I was thinking exactly the same thing, because we're going to hear from him in just a second. There's one single AirPod. Now I'm trying to work out what it is.
Teenagers do.
Is it because it's either that, or is it because every time he's asked a question, someone's going, say this. This is what you want to say. So it's very bizarre. But they fought. Well, I say they fought. They haven't actually fought professionally before, the two of them. But they did used to spar. So there was a moment, apparently, where Daniel Dubois, when he was sparring with Anthony Joshua, actually put him down. Ooh. So this is the story that's been going on.
History.
So it is, and there's history, and it's almost like that Joshua is saying, well, there'll be payback for that. It doesn't really count because it was only sparring. But anyway, this is what happened when he was asked about it.
Can we clear that up now? Obviously, we know you guys are going to fight for the real thing.
on Saturday, but can we clear up this sparring story, these sparring rumours? AJ?
He cracked me with a great shot, and it's my chance to get him back on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it.
There you go,
Well, we sparred hundreds of rounds, innit?
You cracked him, Daniel. So you know you can hurt him.
It's sparring. Now we're fighting. It's different, you know.
Think it's different?
Ready to go. Move on now. You can move on now.
Oh.
Move on.
Okay.
It's not really the most exciting press conference. Often where you get boxers and it all gets a bit needly and they're standing up to each other. There's none of that. It's just like,
It's a bit awkward.
It was a bit uncomfortable.
Low energy as well.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they're going to save it all for tomorrow night. But anyway, it's going to be a huge fight. Little bit about sailing. Now, here's something which is the America's Cup. Now, the America's Cup is sport's oldest competition. Goes back to 1851. It was originally Great Britain against the USA. It was the Isle of Wight. Queen Victoria was watching the first time there was one, and she said, who was second? And it was said, Ma'am, there is no second, because there was only 2 of them that were taking part. So anyway, the America's Cup, we have never won it. There's 36 competitions since then, but Sir Ben Ainsley is the captain there for us, for Great Britain, and anyway, we've done very well so far. So there's only Italy now that we've got to get past. Now, the way it works, I'm trying to explain as well as I can, is that we've gone through, we've beaten Switzerland now in a semi-final. I like how I say we now. I'm now part of this. Ahoy there. So, anyway, so they've beaten Switzerland, and now we'll face Italy in the Louis Vuitton Cup, which suddenly made Ellie's eyes open a little more and ears open a little more. And then whoever wins the Louis Vuitton Cup will then go forward, and then we'll face New Zealand. Now, have a look at this. We've got a little footage here. So we'll face New Zealand in the America's Cup final, which happens at the end of the month. Hopefully, we have a little. We don't have any.
What's the prize for winning the Louis Vuitton? A free handbag?
You know what? I think it probably could be. I think there is a trophy. There is a trophy, but you know it's going to be a very expensive, well-decorated trophy. But you know, I mean, it's one thing. The trophy's not very good, but the case it goes in is quite frankly fantastic. So that's where we are, and it's Ineos Britannia. So it's Sir Jim Radcliffe. You know, we know about Sir Jim, don't we? So Sir Jim Radcliffe, who is funding all of this, and we are getting closer than we've ever been. So all the way back to the 1850s, we've never won it. There's a very good chance that we may well do. Oh, there we are. See, there we are. This is when Britain went against the Swiss. And I'd love to tell you exactly what's going on, but I have no idea whatsoever. But it all looks very nice. The America's Cup final coming up soon.
Great. OK. Thanks, Paul Coit.
Pleasure.
Do stay with us. Still to come. We'll
What's the main thing?
Papers. This is GB News Breakfast with Miriam and Ellie.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But let's get stuck in. Prince Harry, he's consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image, that is according to the Daily Mail.
Who wants him? I'm sorry. This is, of course, he's got his book Spare. The paperback comes out later this year. Now, he's not updating it, but he'll want to promote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says he's not doing any interviews, but we're talking about him now, we're talking about Spare.
Yeah.
And is he going to come back with his wife? What about the children? because apparently it's not safe for his wife and children in this country, according to Harry, even though he took his wife to Colombia, which is much less safe than Britain, in my view.
It's absurd. Anyway, he was able to attend his uncle's funeral quite easily.
He did.
Nobody knew he was coming. He said he wasn't, and then he did. And he was perfectly safe.
And he would have had the same security as every other member of the royal family who attended that event.
Yeah.
But, of course, he didn't speak to his brother at the funeral.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
So if he's trying to fix it, honestly, a funeral is where you should put all differences aside.
Yeah.
Because it's not about you, it's about respect to the person, the family of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his... Diana's sister's husband had died. So, yet they didn't speak. He didn't speak in the church, he didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal, and at that point you should all other things should transcend that. But not.
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh no! Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. We're going through the papers now with former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and former political editor at LBC, Theo Usherwood. Very good morning to you both. Oscar, let's start with you, shall we? Very concerning situation in the Middle East. It does feel like a tinderbox at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, a hugely concerning story in the Daily Mail today. So the Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon, it's been warned by a senior diplomat, could trigger kind of a doomsday scenario, you know, escalation upon escalation, the intensity probably turning up more so than it has done over the last few weeks, certainly. And, you know, Hezbollah's leader has come out and said, you know, retaliation, we're going to, you know, fire back with, you know, unseen aggression, unseen aggression as yet. And I think the warning to British people who may be in the region is just get out now. You know, complete safety first approach. Get out now. It's hugely concerning. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, Miriam, maybe on kind of as a nation now, you know, what should our stance be at this moment in time?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question, but I think the opposite could be true, that actually Israel has made an enormous show of strength. Yeah. Hezbollah are really frightened now. Actually, that speech that was made by the Hezbollah leader, some are saying it was just rhetoric. And during the speech, the Israelis flew a fighter jet over with a sonic boom to, again, emphasise the fact that they are in control in that region. So it could go the other way, and that actually the show of strength now will dissuade Hezbollah from further attacks. So, but in terms of what should our stance be as the UK, I mean, this is a very difficult question for the Labour government to answer. They're very split on this issue.
Yeah. Yes, they are very split on this issue. I think, you know, the purpose of what Israel did was to deter Hamas from continuing to support, deter Hezbollah from continuing to support Hamas in Gaza. And there's, you know, Israel are fighting a war, and it's an existential war on 7 fronts. And so, you know, it was a very targeted attack with the pagers and the walkie-talkies. And you know, from Israel's point of view, it was a successful attack because it took out commanders within Hezbollah, thousands. I think in terms of our stance, I think it's you know, David Lammy has set out his stall. He's made it very clear where there is a change of tack from the British government towards Israel. Firstly, we had, with the withdrawal of our objection to the arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, which of course resulted in that snub. We then had the decision to, and it wasn't a complete ban on sales of arms to Israel, but nonetheless it was 30 licences, which is significant. And I think the danger for the British government from, you know, taking that particular decision, or those particular decisions, is that it withdraws itself from the conversation. It's very difficult for us now to get back into that conversation because Israel sees us not as the close ally that perhaps we once were.
Well, last night we saw diplomats from the US, Britain, other European nations meet in Paris to try and ease tensions. Is that possible at this stage, Oscar? Can we step back from this? Or do we listen to that rhetoric from the Hezbollah leader yesterday and it looks as though it's going to be there's going to be no let-up in the deaths and destruction.
I think your point is very astute. I think it's a real sign of momentum shift and panic, actually. You know, Hezbollah's leader coming out such like aggressive rhetoric over the last 24 hours. In terms of the UK state, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And this is the problem when you are not actually willing to stand up, even during very, and this is such, of course, it's probably the most emotive and difficult issues of the day. And when you, as a nation, the UK, when you do not stand with an ally during those tough times, it is hard to re-enter those talks. And maybe it shouldn't work like this, and it's very sad that it does. But you're in or you're out.
Yeah.
And you know,
I think Netanyahu made a very good point when he went to speak to the US Congress last month, that Israel are fighting a war that everybody in the West should care about. Essentially, they are the only state standing up to Iran, and we're either with them or we're against them, essentially.
And I'd be interested to see during conference, because we talk about domestic... There's so many domestic issues, but it'd be interesting to see how that filters through into the Labour Party conference.
I mean, you know, we've got the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and there are a number of campaigns, which are, you know, events which are going to be linked to the Palestinian, pro-Palestine cause. And it will be very interesting to see that dynamic between those on the left of the party and the leadership as well. And, you know, traditionally there's been a significant friction. But, of course, I think, given where the Labour Party is right across the board, that actually, given, you know, the stance that David Lammy has taken in the last month, 6 weeks or so, that actually you suddenly see a more unified opinion within the Labour Party from the left and from the leadership as well. Whereas previously, there has been, you know, when you look at the leadership under Jeremy Corbyn and you look at those on the could be described as being from the centre or the right of the party. I was thinking a slightly odd way of describing it, but you know, there was always that friction between, you know, they described themselves as sensible people and the left of the party when it came to events such as the ones we're going to see at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool.
So, yeah, should we talk about pressure a little bit closer to home for Labour? And Keir Starmer, remarkable really, 77 days into his premiership, saying, I'm in complete control.
Yes, it's where
Which
you don't.
Sound like
it's where you don't repeat the question back to the person who's interviewing you, isn't it? You know, I'm completely in control. You know, of course, it offers.
I'm not stressed.
I'm not stressed. Yes, but you know, he, as you rightly point out, 77 days into his leadership, he shouldn't be answering these questions right now. This is something that you do, you know, 2-3 years in when you're firefighting on a massive scale, and there's another, you know, scandal that you couldn't have perhaps avoided and that has happened, and of course it relates to the decision, not just in terms of Sue Gray, his Chief of Staff, and the pay that she's been awarded, significant disgruntlement in Number 10 and amongst other advisors because they've seen their pay suppressed, and they've also seen, you know, Sue Gray was advocating, very clearly advocating in terms of fewer special advisors and not receiving so much taxpayers' money. Now she gets £170,000, which is, you know, at least £20,000 more than Liam Booth-Smith, the Chief of Staff to Rishi Sunak, received. It's £3,000 more than the Prime Minister. And I think, and I'd be interested to hear what Oscar says about this, I think there's something of an unwritten rule, isn't there, that you don't receive more than your principal. That you have the boss, because where does the buck stop? Does the buck stop with Sue Gray, or does it stop with Keir Starmer? It should stop with the person who's paid the most amount of money, because that's why they paid the most amount of money.
Yeah. Oscar, 30 seconds. What are your thoughts?
I think the general public, there should be a good awareness amongst special advisors that the general public have no understanding of why you are special and why you are needed. And why you're needed and why you're required. And I think it's completely your job and Sue Gray's job is to completely retreat to the shadows and get on sensibly with her work. This has been the complete opposite of that.
OK. Oscar, Theo, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next hour. Let's have a look at your weather now, shall we, with Annie Shuttleworth.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday. So quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78 is closed southbound from the Eglinton interchange to the A71 Warwick's interchange at Irvine for an investigation. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way between Hermitage and Hock of Ur after an accident. In Antrim, the A26 is closed each way along Frosses Road in Ballymoney after an accident overnight. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. Train services are suspended between Newbury and Bedwyn because of a signalling problem. The M25 in Surrey is down to a single lane clockwise where a lorry caught fire just before junction 6 at Godstone, with queues from junction 5 for the M26. Trains have been stopped between Brockenhurst and Lymington Pier because of a faulty rail, and buses replaced trains between Calstock and Gunnerslake for engineering work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could be the good luck.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Sir Keir Starmer faces a major revolt as the Sue Gray pay row rumbles on.
A civil war is brewing in Number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own.
This comes as Labour donor Lord Alley funded at least 7 Labour cabinet ministers, as well as the Prime Minister, amid the freebie scandal.
Elsewhere, the Treasury is given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England. But the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is still expected to press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments for pensioners.
Offenders, including domestic abusers, are freed from prison without being electronically tagged. It's due to device and staff shortages. So we're asking this morning, just how safe are our streets?
And former Harrods owner Mohammed El Fayed is accused of multiple rapes by staff during their time working for the luxury London department store.
Trouble in the Middle East intensifies, with warnings the Israeli ground invasion in Lebanon will lead to doomsday scenes and all-out war.
And according to research by The Other Half, mothers want more. They want flexibility in employment. So we're asking, should mums be allowed to work from home?
And the sport this morning, the Champions League. David Raya's spectacular double save earned Arsenal a point in Italy last night against Atalanta. In tennis, Emma Raducanu reaches the quarter-final of the Korean Open. See, she's not finished, is she?
She's
and 90,000 people will fill Wembley Stadium tomorrow night for the first all-British heavyweight championship of the world in 30 years as Anthony Joshua takes on Daniel Dubois.
Good morning. A change to much more unsettled weather across southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force later on today. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
It has just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Miriam Kate, and you're watching and listening to GB News Breakfast.
Loads of you getting in touch this morning on Robert Jenrick's comments this morning. Front page of the Daily Mail. English identity is under threat. He says it's a result of the influx of migrants and the sneering attitude of the metropolitan establishment towards English identity.
And a viewer also called Robert says, oh, so the politicians are finally realising what the majority of sensible people have been telling them for years.
Gas says Robert Jenrick's comments will resonate with a lot of the population. However, do you think it will pull in reform members? Not a chance. Nigel Farage is a far better politician than Robert Jenrick.
This is the big challenge to whoever wins the leadership race, isn't it? Is that, yes, they need to get those reform voters back if they're going to have a chance at the next election, but a lot of people are thinking that Farage is a more attractive leader than any of the Tories have to offer.
Dave says that, saying Robert Jenrick is reading from Nigel Farage's and Reform Voters Contract.
And then on the economy, I've got a really good question from Dawn, who asks, where has this £10 billion from the Bank of England appeared from? How long have they held on to it? Well, I think we probably need an economist to explain this one, but basically the Bank of England is going to sell government bonds slower than they previously promised. So basically the government is paying back its debt less quickly, which creates £10 billion. It's all kind of balance sheet artistry. It's not real money, any of this, is it?
Lots of you getting in touch on that £10 billion, though. Paul says the Bank of England has found this £10 billion down the back of the sofa. Does it mean that the only black hole is the one that Labour made by giving inflation-busting pay rises? So it's £9 billion, isn't it, for the public sector pay rises, and £3 billion for the railways, which are political choices.
Well, and the thing is, this country is so in debt that really this is all about more debt, less debt. It's not actually real money. There's actually no cash in the bank. We're just deciding how much to borrow or not borrow. It's quite frightening for the future.
Do you think it does pile the pressure on Rachel Reeves to stop the cut to winter fuel allowance?
Yes, absolutely, because I think now backbenchers will see this as their opportunity to say you no longer need to do this. I mean, I used to be an MP. I can only imagine what the postbags of these MPs are like from pensioners. Some of the stories will be heartbreaking, but from Rachel Reeves' point of view, if she can't make this decision and hold on to it, her authority's lost for the rest of the Parliament.
Janice says the Bank of England has suddenly found this £10 billion to boost Reeves' coffers. Amazing. She can now give it back to the pensioners.
Interesting points of view. Please do keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. Oh, sorry, we've got one more fantastic point of view from Colin, who makes some very sensible suggestions for the Labour Party conference theme songs. Fleetwood Mac, Tell Me Lies, David Bowie, Under Pressure, and ABBA, Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. Wonder if they'll play any of those.
Yeah, thanks.
Things can only get better, perhaps.
Yes, perhaps. Well, let's hope so, shall we? gbnews.com/your say. Do keep views coming in this morning. Now, to our top story this morning, and a civil war has broken out in Westminster as the Prime Minister is forced to deny that he has lost control of the government just 77 days into his premiership amid the Sue Gray row.
Sir Keir Starmer defended himself after questions over Gray's £170,000 salary that reportedly exceeds his own.
Reports suggest that Sue Gray's wage was leaked in a deliberate attempt to damage her politically.
And this comes as Rachel Reeves has been given a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England.
Despite this, report suggests that the Chancellor will press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments. That's despite major backlash.
And we're now joined in the studio by political commentator Tom Slater. Not a good bunch of headlines by the Labour Party in any means, really.
No, it's really, really terrible for them. And I think this is a reminder of Keir Starmer's fundamental weaknesses, really, because he doesn't have a lot of politics to him, he doesn't have a lot of vision, he has the kind of all the charisma of a sort of disappointed deputy head teacher. He's not a particularly compelling individual. But what he did run on was the idea that I am Mr. Rules, I'm Mr. Rectitude, and also I will run a very tidy operation. And what this series of internal briefings and leaks and questions about all of these free clothes and tickets he's been receiving has done, it's completely unravelled that. And it's just a reminder, I think, that the Labour Party have tried to play this game in recent years of pretending that what is unfortunately the normal grubby business of politics, there's a lot of money flowing around, there's a lot of favours being given and taken, and there's also a lot of backstabbing that takes place. They've tried to pretend that's a uniquely Tory problem. Now that they're in power, people are being reminded that in many respects both parties can be as bad as each other on these fronts.
And this is the problem, isn't it? Because British people do not like hypocrites. And Sir Keir Starmer has not broken the rules here. We're not suggesting that he has. He has declared everything. But when you set yourself up as a different kind of politician, when you promise to crack down on cronyism, you are setting yourself up for a fall, aren't you? Unless you do behave completely differently.
No, absolutely. And they've tried to create this halo around themselves. And I've been struck by what short memories the commentariat seem to have. The new Labour years were defined by scandals and backstabbing and leaks and a lot of, Peter Mandelson spending some time on a yacht and then suddenly some donations rolling in to the Labour Party coffers. So it was a remarkable trick that the Labour Party pulled off by pretending they were so much different than the grubby business of Westminster politics would suggest. What the difference is, though, I think, is that you need a kind of vision and a policy programme to fall back on. You need to be able... These things can bounce off of a government if you've got the country behind you and they're united behind what it is you want to do with the country. Because all Keir Starmer has is basically belt tightening and things are going to get worse before they maybe will get better, these issues and these scandals will dog him to a greater degree than they otherwise would, I think.
Really interesting, Katie Balls of The Spectator has written in The Times today and tweeted out a section of her column. In his memoirs, Blair said that he came to regret hounding John Major's government over standards and sleaze. It was a media game and in opposition we played it, he wrote. The goals were easy, but the long-term consequences were disastrous. That's what should give Starmer pause now. His chickens are coming home to roost, aren't they?
No, absolutely. I think that's spot on. And they were playing a very difficult game. They were going around pretending in recent years that no politician had ever told a few porkies before, that no politician had ever taken a free holiday off of a donor before, that no politician had ever presided over a government in which there was a lot of leaking before. And now they're being held to that standard. And I think a lot of potentially younger voters in particular are starting to see that vision which has been presented to the Labour Party wasn't quite up to the reality.
I just want to pick up on that idea of vision, because essentially what you're saying is that if they had an overarching vision, a purpose, then perhaps these headlines would go away. And if you think about previous governments, obviously Thatcher's government had a huge mission, the Blair government to reform the Constitution, whatever you think about that, even Boris Johnson's government to get Brexit done. What actually is the defining purpose, the defining mission of Starmer's government?
It's impossible to say. I mean, Keir Starmer's only consistent political view has been that he would quite like to be Prime Minister. He's now there, and it's a bit like the dog that caught the car. He doesn't quite know what to do with it. And I think what also is preoccupying the government to an almost excessive degree is trying to neutralise the idea that Labour are sort of spendthrift and whatever. So as a consequence of that, they've ended up really leaning into what they call tough decisions, but what often look just like bad decisions to a lot of the public. And what I've been so struck by is that they've been, in a way, kind of cribbing the kind of George Osborne playbook in terms of how to deal with the economy and how to do that, but at the same time with a less optimistic, if that's strange to say, sort of message. So I think the big problem in the heart of all of this is that these are politicians who don't have much politics to begin with, and now we're starting to find that out.
Let's talk about Rachel Reeves, shall we, who's been provided this £10 billion boost from the Bank of England. It's going to be huge pressure on her now, isn't there, to U-turn on scrapping the winter fuel allowance?
No, absolutely, especially because of the horror stories and the statistics we've seen in recent days. 7 out of 10 disabled pensioners losing their winter fuel allowance, the proportion of them who are actually already below the poverty line who will lose their winter fuel allowance, in the context of not only this £10 billion being freed up, but also of Keir Starmer enjoying, you know, £7,000 or £8,000 boxes at the Emirates every week. It's going to be really difficult, but I think she's very wedded to this bitter medicine narrative, and I don't think she'll be able to wriggle free from that, really.
And moving on to the Conservative leadership race, another one. Robert Jenrick's really stuck his neck out this morning. He's been talking about how English identity is under threat. Is he trying to move into Farage's turf?
I think so. I think he's really keen to take those issues of kind of migration, national identity, and really make that key to his particular platform. I mean, the argument that he's making here is it's mass immigration, it's also the sort of liberal elite sneering at the question of national identity. The thing I would say is it's less immigration per se, which I think is the problem here when it comes to kind of patriotism or Englishness or whatever. I think it's the combination of mass immigration and multiculturalism. And also, I think the biggest menace on these things are white middle-class liberals, really. I mean, that old Orwell caricature of there's a certain type of British intellectual who'd rather steal from a poor box and sing the national anthem is very, very true. And I'm always quite struck by the fact that if you look at polls, it's actually ethnic minority Brits, the descendants of migrants certainly, who tend to be more patriotic than your average, which I think is quite telling. But no, you're absolutely right. I think this is him really trying to lean into those issues of migration and identity, which have been around the Tory party leadership at this point, but not really come to the centre of discussion just yet.
OK. Tom Slater, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much.
Now, tensions in the Middle East continue to intensify as the IDF carried out hundreds of strikes in southern Lebanon yesterday. It comes days after this pager and walkie-talkie explosion that killed at least 37 people in Beirut, that the leader of Hezbollah has described as a declaration of war.
Well, joining us now is Chair of the Defence Committee and Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of the situation in the Middle East right now? It does feel as though it is a tinderbox, more so now than ever. We are in a very dangerous place right now.
But we are, indeed. This is a serious escalation, that audacious pager attack and now this massive airstrike on Hezbollah targets, with the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, calling this a new phase in the war. It's clear a second front has now opened up in northern Israel beyond the regular exchange of rocket fire that we see there, complicating, indeed ratcheting up tensions in the Middle East. And on current trajectory, we are heading towards another regional war. Israel has made it its war objective to return residents to the land near the Lebanese border who have had to move because of that constant threat of rocket fire from Hezbollah. And this suggests that Israel is likely to invade that area, southern Lebanon, again to create potentially a buffer zone. And indeed, reports are coming through that IDF forces are indeed massing near the Lebanese border. All this takes us ever further away from securing a ceasefire in Gaza and looking towards longer-term governance and security solutions for the Palestinians. So we have moved into a very, very dangerous period indeed. And what happens in the next 72 hours, indeed the next week or so, will be very critical indeed. I noticed that Rami Murtada, Lebanon's ambassador here in the UK, has warned that Lebanese forces that have been trained by the British, by the way, will not stand idly by and watch if Israel puts boots on the ground to mount a heavy attack there. So this does complicate matters indeed. And Hezbollah's leader herself yesterday also made it clear that they will now retaliate for what happened yesterday, no doubt to date as well. And don't forget what sits behind Hezbollah, Hamas, and indeed the Houthis is Iran. And they've also pledged to retaliate as well. Very, very complicated situation in the Middle East.
Indeed, but there is another view, which is that actually this extraordinary show of strength from Israel that has really made Hezbollah very frightened and very nervous because they realise that the Israeli forces and intelligence are reaching everywhere, that actually this show of strength could stop or at least limit escalations, allow the Israelis to get their people back into those northern regions, but without a full-scale war, because frankly Hezbollah are too frightened now. Isn't that the alternative point of view, that this show of strength could actually stabilise things somewhat?
I'm afraid that's to misunderstand Hezbollah's mentality and its character. It is the most strongest, well-trained non-state actor in the world, as I stress, backed by Iran. And Iran, of course, is increasingly backed by Russia. The idea that somehow Hezbollah will kowtow here, will suddenly say, fine, I now see Israel's military might, and I'm going to do as I'm told, is simply wrong. That's be a poor, I'm afraid, naive interpretation of where events are now likely to unfold. The consequences of a regional war are huge because it will drag other nations in, and Hezbollah will prefer that. As I say, Iran as well. It would also likely see the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. A third of the world's oil passes through there, and trigger more attacks because the Houthis is another proxy influence. They will, I think, reinitiate their attacks in the Red Sea, all with huge consequences for the global economy, including here in the UK.
For us, because David Lammy has been in Paris, hasn't he, with his French, American and Italian counterparts. They're calling for this immediate ceasefire on both sides, but also repeating that advance for British citizens inside Lebanon to get out.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. But going back to your previous comment, who has any appetite for a ceasefire? Ceasefires come about because the stakeholders are perhaps war-weary. They're fed up with war and they're now looking for a way out, an off-ramp. And both Israel, as you implied, and Hezbollah, as I implied, are not looking for any way out at the moment, any form of agreement. What Hezbollah want is to get a ceasefire in Gaza, for Hamas to be back at the table with Israel, but Israel's no closer to stepping forward on that front. And likewise, Israel is determined, because of this new war aim, to be able to provide that buffer zone in northern Israel, southern Lebanon. And that is actually quite understandable. But a nation wanting to secure its own border and defend its own people is absolutely right. So how do we then get there? This is the bigger question for the international community, to how do we then ensure that we have something that works in the longer term? And that requires the United States to be working with Israel to provide that defensive package as well. But also, I'm afraid, this bigger question that I've raised again and again and again over the last decade, until you challenge Iran's proxy influence across the Middle East, no matter what happens right now, whether we're able to sort of de-escalate the current tensions, the threat of Iran and its proxy influence will then continue, causing instability. That will always be a backdrop to whatever we try and secure on the ground.
I think the Israelis would probably say that they're the only ones currently standing up to the Iranians, and indeed have delayed Iranians' nuclear capability by some time. And if only the West would support them more forcefully, then perhaps we would have stronger defence.
Yeah, you make a powerful point. I should stress, though, that the one time that Iran, since 1979, the revolution, decided to attack Israel directly, which was last April, Britain and American airplanes actually defended Israel, took out drones and missiles that were actually heading for the Israeli state. So we do step up, but that's a military approach. Going back to the wider picture here, what we're talking about is Israel's military response. But as a military person myself, I can tell you that the military is a tool to be used towards a wider strategy to the political outcomes that you're seeking to pursue. Now, what does victory in Gaza look like? Where does it actually take you? Bearing in mind, you've got 2 million Palestinians that need to be governed and need their own security. I'm still looking to Israel to say where they want to go with that. Likewise with northern Israel and southern Lebanon, where's the long-term solution that would be plausible to the Lebanese people as well? Because only when you reach that space do you then have something which is going to last, rather than, I'm afraid, the cycle of violence that we're seeing at the moment.
Tobias Ellwood, really good to see you this morning, former chair of the Defence Committee and Conservative MP. Thank you very much.
And now we're going to your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday, so quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. It's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here are all of the details you need for a chance to make it yours.
This is luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
More than half of people aged 50 and over feel happier from having a friendship, and 46% feel a sense of belonging too. Tomorrow is the start of Friendship Month. The Oddfellows, a non-profit friendly society that provides older adults with opportunities to create new friendships, is now inviting more people this September to join their local groups and expand their friendship circles through giving a taster activity at local community centres. We're joined now by Jane Nelson, who's the CEO of Oddfellows. Good morning, Jane. Thanks for joining us. As someone in my mid-30s, I've even noticed as well that my own friendship group has diminished over the years as kind of, you know, people get married and have kids and they kind of drift apart and don't make time for each other.
How important is it to have friends separate to your family? What benefit does that bring you?
As you do get older, you do lose friends for a variety of reasons. Either you lose touch or they have an illness or they pass away as you get older. The stats show that people love spending time with their friends. It always takes somebody, doesn't it? Somebody's got to make that first step to send a text to say, do you fancy meeting up for coffee or do you fancy going to the pub or whatever the arrangement's going to be. But sometimes somebody always has to be make that first step and text or phone. And I think the other key thing is it usually tends to be the same person, but that doesn't matter as long as that connectivity is made, because that's what you need. You need the connectivity. If you think about when we were children, we'd go around the playground and say, will you be my friend? Well, we don't tend to do that as we get older. But be brave, look on Oddfellows' website, see all the amazing events we've got on, go to see what's going on in your area, oddfellows.co.uk, or you can telephone 0800 028 1810, and our team will be more than happy to point them in the right direction of their local events, and there's so much going on, 300 going on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, free childcare for under twos is one of the key benefits afforded to parents by the government these days. But we're asking this morning, is it really enough? Because according to research by the other half, mothers want more. They want flexibility.
Now we have Fiona McKenzie, who is CEO of the other half, and she believes that it's time we allow mums more freedom to work from home.
So, should we reform the rules so that mothers have more work-from-home opportunities than their male counterparts? Well, to debate this, we are joined, of course, by Fiona McKenzie and the journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Really good to see you both this morning. Fiona, good to see you this morning. Make the case for us. Why is this so important for mothers?
Well, it's incredible that we've ended up 20 years down the line after the UK government decided that it wanted all parents to work. So this has been a huge government push for the last couple of decades. But mums repeatedly tell surveys, they told us, they tell pollsters, they take part-time jobs themselves, but they keep making the case that they need flexible and part-time work, they need to take time out when their children are small to care for them, and then they want to come back to work. Overwhelmingly, mums want to work, but they want to work on their terms. They want to work in a way that allows them time to care for small children. But they're not being given this, and this is the incredible strange pace we ended up in, where employers just don't seem to get that if you give your female employees and your dads, obviously, the chance to work part-time, the chance to work flexibly, you get to keep them, you get to retain the best people, you get the best people in our economy working in the best jobs, and I think we get the best outcomes for all of us. But we have this, as I say, deeply strange situation where the government is pushing really, really hard for parents to maximise their working hours. Parents are saying, well, we want to work, but we want to take time out to obviously care, and the jobs just aren't there for them. So I think we need a big shift from government and from employers in saying, actually, what we've been trying hasn't worked. And what we've been trying has meant that some of the fantastic mums in really high-skilled professions like law and finance and even things like teaching and nursing are leaving these in-demand professions because they can't work in a way that allows them time to be with their children. It has to change.
Sarah Louise, Fiona's right, isn't she, that those early years are so precious. Most parents do want to maximise time with their babies and small children in those early years. Isn't it right that we allow mums and dads to work more flexibly, to have more time at home during those years?
I find this whole generation of modern mothers incredibly self-indulgent and entitled. They already get a year to play house at home when the baby arrives. Then on top of that, they get free childcare up to the age of 2. The government is always levelling incentives at them. Tax breaks for this, tax breaks for trust funds for the baby, free fruit and veg, this and that. They have so much on offer to them. And now they want to be able to go off and have coffee breaks in an afternoon. I was reading before coming on here, one mother wants flexible working so she can indulge in her afternoon swims, which she says makes her relaxed. And then she said she might do some work in the evening once the kids go to bed. But it's the people who are left in offices, those without children, who are literally left holding the literal baby. They're the ones that are keeping the offices going. Again, with a lot of working mothers, as soon as it clocks 5 o'clock, they're out the door because they've got to get back to the kids, or if Tristan or Peregrine's something, they fall over, they have to rush off immediately and attend to them. And it's those left behind in the offices who are picking up the slack. There's no tax breaks for those people. There's no incentives for those people. They're just expected to get on and shore up the workload that's left behind from those who want to be able to sit around at home all day.
But Fiona, at the end of the day, this isn't really actually about parents. It's about what's best for children, isn't it? And the research shows that if in those early years children develop very strong attachments to their mothers or their primary carer, then actually they're far more likely to grow up into the kind of good workers that Sarah Louise describes, aren't they?
Well, 100%. I mean, this is the whole point, is that it's in all of our interests for the, to be honest, overwhelming number of people in the country who want to have children to be able to do that in a way that means that their children are going to succeed in later life, that they are supported and they have the time. I mean, I obviously reject Sarah's point that, looking after small children is harder work than any office job that I have ever had. And it's something I'm extremely happy to do because I think it's incredibly important. But I think we need to move away from this idea that there's this resentment between people who don't have children. I had children, when I was in my 30s, I went a long time without, as someone without children. And resentment between those and parents. I think we should all work together in a way that, benefits all of us in the long term.
Absolutely. And Sarah Louise, who exactly is going to pay for the pensions and healthcare of tomorrow if people don't have children because, frankly, it's too expensive and they can't get the care that they need?
I'm not against people having children by all means. We do need to have a better system. What I don't like is that, you know, there is this entitlement from mothers that you should be able to have it all and that everything has to stop for around them. And if that's the case, you know, if we all have these flexible working hours and all of us want to go part-time because it's better for this or better for that, really the workforce just grinds to a halt. Yes, there does have to be better methods, but I really think that people should be going into an office and into work. You can't have it both. You have to decide, really, do I want to be at home for those first formative years and then come back into the workforce later? And I think that's up to mothers themselves to examine that. And as I say, children are a blessing. They're not a God-given right.
Fiona, what's your response to that?
Just one thing. I mean, I completely. It would be fantastic if women did have the choice to look after small children. But they don't. We live in an economy where parents have to work, where they are compelled to work. And again, I think that's been part of the government's push, is we want everyone to be working. If that's the case, we need to apply some reality and make work that allows us time to care for children too.
OK, CEO of The Other Half, Fiona McKenzie, and journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much. Let us know what you think on that one. gbnews.com/yoursay.
Fascinating debate, one that's very close to my heart. And coming up, we'll be joined by Paul Coit and Spencer Oliver to discuss this weekend's huge boxing match at Wembley. You're listening to GB News with Miriam and Ellie.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78 is closed southbound from the Eglinton interchange to the A71 Warwick's interchange at Irvine for an investigation. Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way around Hermitage after an accident. In Antrim, the A26 is closed each way along Frosses Road at Ballymoney after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. The M42 from Staffordshire into Warwickshire is partly blocked southbound by an accident between junctions 10 and 9 from Tamworth to Curdworth, with delays in both directions. On the M4 in London, there's a lane closed where a car's broken down on the westbound exit at junction 4 at Heathrow, with queues from junction 3 at Heston. And on the M25 in Surrey, it's down to a single lane clockwise, where a lorry caught fire just before junction 6 at Godstone, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. We're going through the sport now with Paul Coit, and we have to talk about your beloved Arsenal.
I do. Yes, my beloved Arsenal.
You love talking about Arsenal.
Yes. It's the old, it was the old Morecambe and Wise sketch that Arsenal, but that's one you'll have to look up on YouTube. But anyway, Champions League, Atalanta, which is in Bergamo, by the way, in the north of Italy.
Nice.
Thank you.
I'd like to let everybody know where it is. There we are. Yeah, there's Bergamo there. Atalanta 0, Arsenal 0. And we've got Raya saves Arsenal, and he really did as well. David Raya, who signed from Brentford, who I don't know whether that's... I hope there's not a two-finger salute there. I don't think they do that there in Spain. That's probably... but there was a penalty against Arsenal. David Raya dived down, saved it, and as if that wasn't enough, the rebound, he got up and dived over to the other side of the goal as well. 55 minutes, there's the save there. Fingertips, magnificent save. Arsenal, OK, they weren't brilliant. They probably can be better, but they're missing Martin Odegaard, and he's got a very bad ankle injury, and that's going to be like that for quite some time by the sound of things. And they've got a huge game at the weekend, so they play Manchester City on Sunday. And ironically, the WSL, the women's football begins, and Arsenal will be playing Manchester City in that game as well, but that one at the Emirates. So there's one at the Etihad and one at the Emirates, and that's looking forward to the weekend.
Some big boxing news too.
Yeah, well, this is tomorrow night, and this is a huge fight. I mean, it's 90,000 people are going to be packed into Wembley Stadium to see Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. So... boxing, I did mention this earlier, it's kind of difficult to be able to see it.
Yeah.
When you go, I mean, it's an amazing atmosphere. This is the press conference which happened at Guildhall yesterday. That's Dubois there on the right. And he'd actually sparred with AJ, Anthony Joshua, earlier on in their career. Like, AJ walks in. See, there's so much psychology that goes on. And we were talking about, see, you're not really sure, Miriam, about the AirPod.
Single AirPod.
I don't know whether he's found one or lost one.
He's listening to GB News.
Do you think that's probably what it is? Just listen. See, I don't know whether someone's... Is it a thing, the one AirPod?
It is for teenagers. Because you can listen to music and your parents don't know you've got the AirPod in, I think. Is
that why? Yeah. Because the thing is that... But you don't get the true stereo, do you?
That's right.
If you just listen in one... If you listen in one ear. So, anyway, that's... But the thing is, he's even posing there.
Yeah, with his AirPod.
With the one ear. So it's the Riyadh season. The Riyadh season, so it's a win sponsored by Saudi Arabia, but it's going to be at Wembley Stadium. They're saying that they're doing us a favour to actually have it at Wembley Stadium so we can see it. Dubois, 23 fights, 21 wins for Alexander Usyk, the world champion last year, because there are 5 world belts. So this is for the IBF. It gets very confusing. So he relinquished the IBF, which then has been picked up by Daniel Dubois, and that's what they're fighting for. Does that make any sense whatsoever when I'm talking about the belts?
Wow, I think you did a good job there.
Kind of.
Oh, Lily, maybe next time we do it.
Maybe next time. It's just loads of belts. The thing is, there was the old... I remember speaking to my old dad years ago, and he would go, well, it should be, the way boxing should be is that you fight for the British title, you fight for the European title, and then you have one world title. But now there are so many different... There's the WBA, there's the WBO, there's the WBC, so they all have their own world title. So to actually unify a world title, which is very rare, which is what Alexander Usyk did do, is to win everything, and then that makes you the true world champion. So this is for one belt.
Okay.
But then whoever wins this, I can see those eyes there. They're like...
Well, I'm just thinking this is all about the money, isn't it? You know, the more opportunities there are to make money out of this.
You're being cynical, but you're absolutely right, because that is what it's about, because that's why you have all these different world titles. But anyway, it's going to be huge. 90,000 people, you can't argue with that. Wembley Stadium tomorrow night. And it's the first British heavyweight championship of the world since 1993, and that was when Frank Bruno and Lennox Lewis got it on. And Lennox Lewis won that one.
Now, we may come back to the boxing, but please can we talk about Emma Raducanu? Because I never wrote her off. And
you haven't, have you?
She's playing well.
When will you write her off? How long are you going to give it?
She's 21.
I know she's 21.
I'd say at least she's got another good 10 years, at least, before we need to even think about that.
It's been quite a few years, though, hasn't it, since she won the US Open? And every time we think, Emma Raducanu's going to do something, Emma Raducanu, it's going to happen for Emma. Then it doesn't, and then it does again. There was injury worries again yesterday, but she's into the quarter-final now of the Korean Open. You know, it's not one of your big ones, but it's got a future, OK? It's not your US or your Australian or your the Wimbledon or the French, but the Korean.
And all the big stars are playing.
Yeah, well, that's it. But, you know, there's still names in there, so she's at the quarter-final stage. So Ellie's, as long as Ellie has belief in
Keep
Emma,
the faith.
I will
She'll be
keep
fine.
talking about Emma Raducanu. So we wish her well. And also the other tennis is the Laver Cup, which happens over the weekend, which is in Berlin. And that is like the Ryder Cup of tennis. They try to make it interesting there and make it a team sport. But I love the fact that the two coaches, the two managers, the two men in charge of one of the rest of the world is John McEnroe. There's John there on the right, and on the left, who's now moved to the right, there's Bjorn Borg. There he is. He looks pretty good, doesn't he, Bjorn?
Good head of hair.
An amazing head of hair. Look at that. It's a very large cup as well. Because then you see them talking. You see Bjorn there with John McEnroe, and look at the size of that cup.
Yeah.
By the way, that cup is about 50 feet behind them. That's how big that thing is. So anyway, that's across the weekend. So loads going on.
Very
this weekend.
exciting.
Brilliant. OK, thanks, Paul Coy. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Do stay with us. Still to come, we're going to be going through the papers with Theo Usherwood and Oscar Redrop.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
A window cleaner is battling to prove he has the only portrait of William Shakespeare made in his lifetime.
Yes, so owner Stephen Wadlow has been trying to validate the painting for years. He's had it x-rayed, he's had it analysed by experts, he's had it scientifically dated back to 1595 when the playwright was 31 years old. If it is the Bard, it could be worth north of £200 million.
Steve, welcome to GB News. First of all, just explain how you came to have this painting in your possession.
It was sat there all my lifetime sort of thing while I was growing up, above the television in the corner. It was only back about 12 years ago that a visitor, she said, I think it looks like William Shakespeare, I like your copy of William Shakespeare, and was shocked to see it was an original painting. So it was only then that I started researching, and the different institutions have helped with the x-rays and all the rest of it. But then, is it actually Shakespeare? Well, all the facial comparisons, technology, everything like that, all matches with the Droschau, which is the only known 2D image of Shakespeare. And who do you go to find that out?
There's a suggestion in the Sun's write-up of this story that you've been struggling to be heard in the academic world, the lofty art world. It's all a bit snooty. Yes. It's about who you know, and you're a tradesman.
Yes. That is definitely true in some avenues, but then I have to say, and it's lovely to be able to have this opportunity to say it, there's other people in that world that have been fabulous. It's taken a long time to sort of get listened to. We want the discussion out there because all the evidence that we've got indicates that this really should be discussed.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to GB News Breakfast with Miriam and Ellie. And joining us now in the studio to go through what's making the news today, we've got former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and former political editor of LBC, Theo Usherwood. Now, turning to you first, Oscar, there's this very interesting story about Nigel Farage, obviously newly elected MP for the Reform Party, claiming that he can't carry out constituency surgeries in Clacton because of essentially threats of violence.
I completely believe it. I think there is a really unhealthy... It's been met with a real unhealthy kind of scepticism because, Farage, he wants to swan off here, there and everywhere. Maybe he's using it as an excuse. But, you have to remember, over the last few years, we've had 2 MPs lose their lives. You have to remember that Farage himself has had... And I know... people who are not politically aligned to Farage, that's kind of took a bit of joy in it, I think, like with the milkshake,
Yes,
it's only a milkshake, or I think people were lobbing like cement at him from the top of his campaign bus. He's had, really kind of hairy moments. So I can completely believe it. It's very, very sad. It inhibits democracy. Me and Theo were talking in the green room. However, he will have to find a proper way to engage with his constituents. Whatever you think of Nigel Farage, whatever part of the political spectrum you are, he's an incredible communicator. He's a very creative thinker, actually, as a campaigner and as a politician. And he's going to have to find a way in order to get around this completely understandable fear to engage with the people who ultimately elected him.
And Theo, really, the basic foundation of our democracy is that politicians are safe, isn't it? I mean, is a Zoom surgery just as good?
Well, it could be a Zoom surgery. I don't know whether there are other precautions that could be introduced, ways for Nigel Farage to engage with his constituencies, as Oscar said. But I think one of the foundations of there's two foundations. One's that our politicians are safe, but also that we have a constituency-based system, and so that one way the public can get help, whether it's on anything from around with their council to GP services or whatever it is they can go to their local MP who represents them, and they can raise the issue at the highest echelons of government if necessary, or just help out by writing a letter to the council or said GP surgery. That's how it works. And I think Nigel Farage has to, the longer he leaves it, spending time outside of his constituency, not working the patch, the harder it is going to be for him to get back in and start engaging with his constituents. And I'd also say there is real merit. There's something to be gained from being a strong local MP, because often if an MP stands up in the House of Commons and says, well, I say this and I say that it could be just sort of swept aside by the Minister or the Prime Minister if it's at PMQs. If you say, my constituent has suffered this, my constituent wrote to me and said this, that's a much more powerful argument and can't just be swatted away. And there are MPs who have made, headlines and they've made a name for themselves just by being very good at their job of being an MP. And Nigel Farage just needs to think, as Oscar said, think very creatively, whether it's Zoom or whether it's, putting in, even more security measures, whether it's, wanding people coming into his surgery or however it might be, or unannounced walkabouts. However, he needs to find a way of doing something to get into Clacton and start working the patch a bit harder.
What do you make of this, Miriam?
Well, I absolutely, like Oscar, think it's totally believable. And sadly, MPs receive death threats all the time, even MPs who aren't anywhere near as prominent as Nigel Farage. But I also agree that being seen and being around and about is a very important tenet of our democracy. But I think people forget about MP staff. So, yes, Farage is obviously at risk, but if he were to do a surgery and he were to be attacked, it's not just him that's in danger, his staff would also be too. So I think it's absolutely right for MPs to take decisions based on the safety of their staff and not just themselves. But it is sad, but unfortunately all through history, very prominent leaders do face these security threats, and I think we're right to take them seriously.
Oh, yeah, we have to undoubtedly have to take them seriously.
Theo, let's stay with you, shall we, and look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And this is Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, criticising Amazon's decision to order staff back into the office 5 days a week. Yes, we've got this employment rights bill that's due to come forward, and at the moment the government's putting forward various ideas to improve workers' rights. One of the ideas is the de facto request, a default request that you can put in for flexible working. This, of course, runs completely against what Amazon, a significant employer, trillion-dollar company, has done in terms of ordering staff back into the office 5 days a week. And it's now, it's interesting to see this tension now starting to emerge between businesses on one hand and the government on the other when it comes to what are going to, I'd imagine, amount to some quite significant reforms. Interestingly, Jonathan Reynolds said, points to Amazon saying, show us your evidence. But we haven't seen any evidence from the government, I should say. They haven't done any impact assessment or, done any research to show why working from home boosts productivity.
I have to admit, I can't believe it's even up for debate. I'm not in a poor me way at all. But as someone who has throughout my life been conscious of mental health problems, not to make a big deal of it at all, I cannot tell you how good it is for your mental health to get out and be in the office and to have to do it and to work. Do not get me wrong, when it's a Monday morning and it's, I'm looking, it's cold outside, I would love, that initial response, isn't it, as a human being, is to go, oh, just stay at home. But it's not good for you.
No,
it's
absolutely, especially for young people. And what I find astonishing is that Amazon are a private company. It's nothing to do with the government. They can say what they like about the civil service, but surely Amazon can make their own decisions. But another story just in on the BBC is that public debt, national debt, has reached 100% of GDP for the first time since the 1960s, which, of course, we were still paying off war debt at that point. Is this a trend that's just going to continue?
Oh, that's a very, 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 very depressing thought. Unless a government... a Labour government can absolutely get the strategy together to genuinely and it's often how tough choices are often framed in an austerity sense, but actually make the brave, tough choices to deliver growth, to actually actively pursue it, not just language, brave supply-side reform, then, yeah, potentially. But as we hinted at earlier, I just, I really hope it's not going to come at the budget.
Yeah. Well,
not giving anything away there, but I just want a government that can actually prioritise growth. It's the only way out of...
Absolutely. But, Theo, the timing of this is significant, isn't it? Because the milestone had been widely expected to be reached ahead of the budget, but it has now been reached at a time when the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is already seeking these big savings to go. We've been hearing, haven't we, about these tough decisions to be made.
And I think, obviously, the Chancellor set out a plan where, the national debt will be falling as a share of GDP by the end of this Parliament. She has got at her disposal the ability to potentially tinker with the rules, and that would allow another £20 billion worth or so of fiscal headroom. I think the pressure is going to be on, actually, for the Chancellor not to do that. We're in a yo-yo situation because, of course, in the first hour we were discussing the £10 billion boost and whether we could see some relief when it comes to the winter fuel allowance, and that £1.4 billion could be just swept aside and pensioners could keep their winter fuel allowance. And now you'd look at this announcement and say, well, actually, how would that £10 billion boost be better utilised? And you'd say, well, paying down the national debt.
Yeah. It might be unpopular to say it, but it really is the pension commitments that are bringing about this forecast of horrific debt. And it's very difficult to see, unless the birth rate goes up, how this is going to change. So we just have fewer and fewer working-age people for each pensioner. And we've got countries like Japan that are way further down the line. They have a debt to GDP of 250%.
So this is a question I do not know the answer to, but I know it's something you have spoken about. How does a country sort out a birth rate? How do you...
Well, nobody has the answer to that yet, although other countries are trying a lot harder than we are and at least acknowledge it's a problem, whereas Keir Starmer said last week that he wasn't really interested in the birth rate. So, anyway, we'll see how that goes.
We've just had a statement from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, who talks about inheriting an economy that wasn't working for the working people, talks about the £22 billion black hole in the public finances. And again, he says we are taking the tough decisions now to fix the foundations of our economy so we can rebuild Britain and make every part of the country better off. Theo, Oscar, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Annie Shuttleworth is here now. All the details for your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday. So quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England as
as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Ayrshire, the A78's closed southbound from the Eglinton interchange to the Warwick interchange at Irvine for an investigation. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed each way at Hermitage after an accident. In Antrim, the A26 is closed along Frosses Road in Ballymoney after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. The M42 from Staffordshire into Warwickshire is blocked southbound by an accident between junctions 10 and 9 from Tamworth to Curdworth. There are delays in both directions. On the M6 in Warwickshire, there are 2 lanes closed southbound after an accident between junctions 3 and 2 near Coventry, causing delays. On the M25 in Surrey, it's down to a single lane clockwise where a lorry caught fire just before junction 6 at Godston, with queues back along the M26 towards junction 5. And train services are suspended between Brockenhurst and Lymington Pier because of a faulty rail.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is your chance to...
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Sir Keir Starmer faces a major revolt as the Sue Gray pay row rumbles on.
A civil war brews in Number 10 as the Prime Minister defends his decision to pay his Chief of Staff a salary that exceeds his own.
This comes as Labour donor Lord Alley funded at least 7 Labour cabinet ministers, as well as the Prime Minister, amid the freebie scandal.
Elsewhere, the Treasury is giving a £10 billion budget boost by the Bank of England, but the Chancellor is still expected to press ahead with scrapping winter fuel payments for pensioners.
The Reform UK Party conference kicks off today. Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader, will be joining us shortly to tell us what to expect.
And offenders, including domestic abusers, are freed from prison without being electronically tagged due to device and staff shortages. Just how safe are our streets?
Former Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed is accused of multiple rapes by staff during their time working at the luxury London department store.
And trouble in the Middle East intensifies, with warnings that the Israeli ground invasion in Lebanon will lead to doomsday scenes and all-out war.
Good morning. A change to much more unsettled weather across southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force later on today. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. I'm Ellie Costello.
And I'm Miriam Cates, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has relinquished ownership of Reform UK. Let's take a listen.
Decision. I no longer need to control this party. I'm going to let go. We will change the structure of the party from one limited by shares to a company limited by guarantee. And that means it's the members of Reform that will own this party. I'm relinquishing control of the company.
Now, this change comes as Reform UK's conference kicks off in Birmingham today.
And GB News political editor Christopher Hope is there for us. Good morning, Christopher. Good to see you. A new chapter for Reform UK.
Yeah, morning, both from here, from probably bracing NEC here in Birmingham. That's right, 4,000 paying members coming here to hear speeches from Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, Zia Youssef, the chairman, and others. It's a real moment, I think, this party to mark its 5 MPs that it won in that general election campaign just in July. We'll be having there's a party here later. They call it the like of which hasn't been seen on these shores for many years. So they're planning a big party, a big celebration of those wins. We'll hear speeches, as I said there, from Richard Tice and Lee Anderson. To give you a flavour of the speeches which the members here will be hearing from, Richard Tice will attack the negligent folly of net zero, an extremist cult, he'll call it. He'll say Ed Miliband, the climate change secretary, is the most dangerous man to the British economy. He says that other countries are laughing at the UK for not mining or coal or taking our oil out to keep the lights on in this country. It's a gross negligence, he'll say, on our part to impoverish our economy. And Lee Anderson, of course, who presents on GB News, he'll be saying that he says he's heard talk about getting our country back. He'll look back to a time when children were taught to be good citizens, not taught they can be of a different gender. So that's a flavour of what we'll be hearing later on from Reform UK. But here we are at the NEC in Birmingham. I'm struck also, having been to many of these party conferences going back nearly 3 decades, Miriam and Ellie, how it's set near a motorway so people can drive and get here. This is set up to make it easy for members to get here, whereas the other parties' conferences in the middle of Birmingham or Manchester are often really aimed more or as much at lobbyists and big corporates as members. So this is certainly an event, I think, where they're putting their membership first. And our 80,000 members of Reform UK will be hearing later from Zia Youssef, the chairman.
Yeah, and a really interesting time for Reform. Obviously, they must be celebrating a huge victory in their new MPs. And it seems like they think they're on an upward trajectory. Farage has announced these changes to how the party is formed, and they've clearly got Labour in their sights. But meanwhile, we've got Robert Jenrick really trying to park his tanks on the Reform lawns today, talking about English identity, the fact that that's been neglected. Do Reform see any of the leadership candidates as a threat, or are they kind of just focusing on what they need to focus on?
For currently, they're focusing on what they need to focus on Miriam. They think they'll be standing 2,000 candidates in next year's English local elections. Also, there's now a target for the Welsh Assembly elections, and then latterly the Scottish elections. And believe me, Nigel Farage didn't even campaign in Scotland during the general election. It shows how far this party has come. The question is, how can they maintain a degree of momentum behind this party? They're looking on at this 4-way tussle for the Tory leadership. They're not even talking about that to me. I guess they may, if they hope that maybe Tom Tugendhat would win. He's seen as quite a soft left Tory that might support Reform UK. But I think Robert Jenrick is trying to work out how he can present a policy platform to win over some of those 4 million voters who went to Reform at the last election. All 4 candidates have told GB News they will not do any deals with Reform UK. They will not do any deals with Nigel Farage. They look at him and say, there's a politician who says he wants to destroy the Tory party. How can we do a deal with him? So the challenge for those 4 candidates, including Robert Jenrick, is setting out a stall to tempt back those angry, furious former Tory voters who went to Reform in July.
Chris, whilst we've got you, can I ask you about Sir Keir Starmer insisting that he's completely in control of his government? It's despite this bitter briefing war, if you like to call it that, over the salary of Sue Gray and Gifting Gate.
I know. It's very hard. If you're asked if you're in control, you can only say yes because you're the Prime Minister. He had a very difficult media round, as they call it, in Westminster circles yesterday. He met with loads of regional political editors and was told to try and defend himself. This problem with Sue Gray is difficult. She is paid more than him. What's happening here is she is a lightning conductor for discontent amongst lots of MPs who feel they can't get to Keir Starmer. We've seen it before. In a sense, Sue Gray is a proxy for that discontent. I think she's quite an effective person running governments, but it seems that politically the team around Sir Keir Starmer in recent weeks have been inept at handling that concern about what is going on in the heart of Downing Street.
Thank you, Chris, and we'll be returning to the Reform Party conference in a moment. But moving on, former Harrods boss Mohammed Al-Fayed has been dubbed a monster with no moral compass after it has been revealed that he allegedly raped 5 women.
Well, let's take a listen to an excerpt from the BBC documentary.
He had come upstairs into my room. I was absolutely terrified. Got into bed with me. He was trying to kiss me and push himself on me, and I don't know how I did it. I just kicked him off. I kicked and screamed, and again I got him off. I was just terrified. I said, I just want to go to sleep on my own. Mr. Fayed, I don't want to, Mr. Fayed. And he kept saying, relax, please relax. Like, how can you relax when you're in that situation? The lawyers organised for a shredding truck to come to my lawyer's office. It was shredded in front of us, including tapes I had of him on my phone that had messages and voicemails, really quite nasty voicemails on them.
Well, according to the documentary, Harrods, the luxury department store, helped to cover up the abuse allegations.
And that's as the current owners have said they are utterly appalled by the revelations and have issued an apology.
Well, former detective and Rochdale's sex abuse ring whistleblower Maggie Oliver gave us her thoughts.
Is perhaps even more shocking is that I'm not that shocked. I think wherever you turn, where you see power and money and control, you have predatory men. And Mohammed Al-Fayed is the latest in a long line of predatory men who have used their influence, wealth and power to groom and sexually abuse vulnerable women. And vulnerability comes in many different forms, whether it's a child victim of a grooming gang, or whether it's a victim of Jimmy Savile, or Harvey Weinstein, whose victims were wanting to get on in their own career. The women in this particular case, for me, were vulnerable for other reasons. He was their boss. They would lose their job. Where do they turn with these allegations? And I think the powerlessness of the victims is what repeatedly shocks me. I don't know more than is in the public arena with this case, to be honest, Ellie. But I do know that numerous victims did report to the police. The question has to be, why were those reports of rape and attempted rape not taken more seriously? And why was he allowed to continue to abuse in this way for many, many years?
And I think, Maggie, we've become sadly, shockingly used to these historic sex scandals coming out from perhaps the 70s. But this is much more recent. We're talking the most recent allegation just 14 years ago. Have things really changed? Are women more able to report this kind of abuse now than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago?
I think I would really push back on that, Miriam, because, I've started my own charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and we support victims every single day who are being raped and abused today. And the shocking thing is that, a great deal of the work that we do in the foundation is supporting women and men, actually, who come to us having reported to the police and having had their cases closed down, not thoroughly investigated. There are so many factors that feed into this. But what I see still, and have seen for many years now, is a defensiveness to protect the organisation, whether that's the police, whether that's Harrods, whether it's the BBC with the Jimmy Savile scandal, what is the overriding priority is to protect the organisation at all costs.
A spokesperson for Harrods has said the Harrods of today is a very different organisation to the one owned and controlled by Al Fayed between 1985 and 2010. It is one that seeks to put the welfare of our employees at the heart of everything we do.
Now, at 12 minutes past 9, it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. It's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here are all the details you need for a chance to make it yours.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Angela, what have we got?
Hello, there's an awful lot, but I think the main interesting thing is that Prince Harry said a week or so, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, that he absolutely wasn't going to go to his uncle's funeral because there wasn't enough protection for him. His uncle, Lord Fellows, was married to Jane Spencer, who was Diana's sister, who was the most practical and helpful of the three children, the three girls, and she's done an awful lot for Harry. I thought it was just terrible. He wasn't going to go there, but he has been there. They didn't talk to William. William didn't talk to him. Did he get any protection? Who knows? And if he didn't, if he takes the government to court yet again, they would say, well, look, we managed without that, but we don't know about that. But also the paper, the magazine that does loads for Harry and Meghan, they were the ones who said he wasn't going, so they said what he wanted them to say.
He doesn't need any protection. I mean, how did he get there? Probably in a Bombardier private jet that gives off 60 times more carbon than anybody else.
Yes, well, we don't know about that. The good thing was that he was there, and of course today is Remembrance Day for Diana, the day she died. So that he went there and he was with her side of the family, and I think that that's very good and might help him feel a bit better about things.
But neither of them are doing well out of it. William is not doing well out of it. Harry is not doing well out of it. The King is not doing well out of it. Meghan Markle's not doing well out of it. Why can't they just...
No, I don't think it's that easy. I think that they might do much worse if they were together again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
And welcome back. You're watching and listening to GB News Breakfast with Miriam and Ellie. And now we're joined by the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, who joins us live from the Reform UK party conference in Birmingham. Good morning, Richard. What's the atmosphere like?
Well, good morning. The sky is a little bit gloomy, I have to say. Not much sign of an Indian summer, but it is bright and cheery inside the conference venue. It is going to be absolutely seismic, our biggest ever conference over 2 days, well over 3,000 delegates. It's going to be some amazing speeches. We're going to be celebrating our incredible achievement, 4.1 million votes, 5 MPs at the general election that everybody said we couldn't get any MPs. But we're also going to be tackling Starmageddon on steroids. I mean, I launched this word back in January. Little did I realise how horrific it would be after just 12 weeks. We're going to be talking about the failures of their immigration policy, the absolute catastrophe of the cult of net zero. That's what I'm going to be focusing on in my speech, and much, much more. Loads to look forward to.
Can I ask you about Nigel Farage, who has explained why he's not holding the physical in-person surgeries in Clacton-on-Sea? He worries about a knife attack at those surgeries. We've been hearing this morning that the Speaker's office has no record of telling Nigel Farage not to hold in-person surgeries. So can you explain why he's made that choice not to do so?
Yeah, look, the Parliamentary Security Authorities actually have been first class, but at the end of the day, it's up to the individual MP to make their own judgment about their personal safety, taking into account the advice that one receives. And sadly, we saw just within the first 10 days of Nigel's campaigning in the general election, 2 attacks on him, and, that has to be taken very, very seriously. So, that's why Nigel's making those important decisions. But, no one's got more visibility, frankly, than Nigel on social media, his presence. I'm getting millions of views on mine, the other 3 MPs likewise. So we're out there, we're making a noise. Frankly, we are the real opposition. The Tories have vacated the premises, hardly ever see them in the House of Commons. I've spoken 16 times. I've challenged the zealot-in-chief, Ed Miliband. I've challenged the Home Secretary. I've challenged the Health Secretary on the failings of the NHS. So look, we're holding them to account. That's what people expect of opposition parties.
But it's a really important pillar of our democracy, isn't it, that our MPs, our constitutional MPs, engage with constituents. So Nigel Farage is going to have to think creatively, isn't he, about how he can meet his constituents face to face, or at least have that personal relationship with them, because he's been criticised, hasn't he, for not spending enough time in his constituency.
Oh, listen. The time to worry is when people are not criticising Nigel. I mean, that's the time to worry, as opposed to when they are criticising him. Listen, the truth is that, we're all talking to our constituents. I get hundreds of emails every day, every week. We're responding to those. I know Nigel's team is doing likewise. Where we can help constituents with issues, with challenges, obviously that's what we try and do. I was chuckled when someone wondered if I could help them with the woodwork and the carpentry in their home. I said, if I helped you doing that, then frankly, that would be a disaster. So look, we try and help where we can, but we can't do everything.
Now, Richard, you've said that your reform is trying to set yourselves up as the main opposition, and obviously we've had these changes in how the party works. You're obviously trying to grow your candidate base. But there was a lot of criticism at the general election about the selection of some of those candidates, perhaps unsavoury views, perhaps even illegal activity that they'd taken part in the past. How are you going to improve your vetting processes so that that doesn't happen again, and so that you can build this kind of credible party?
So did you ask the same question of the Green Party, who also stood over 600 candidates?
I certainly
and
will,
who had
but I haven't
many
got them
more
on the
people
line
who
at the
they had to
moment.
withdraw the whip. Excellent. Well, please do. No, well, that's fine. Well, listen, the point is, when you've got a big entity, a big organisation, you always get the odd person who says or does something daft. You deal with it promptly and rapidly. And of course, we're a fast-growing political start-up. We're making great strides. We're professionalising. We're democratising. We're getting ready for the May county elections, the mayoral elections. And I think we're making huge strides. And here's the point. Even since the election, guess what? We're going up in the polls in Scotland because people see this common sense of our policy against net zero, the common sense of using our energy treasure. We're going up in the polls in Wales. We're equally or ahead of the disappearing Conservatives. So look, we're making progress. We came second to Labour in, I think, 90 seats. Trust the British people, trust the voters. That's what I say. That's who we're targeting, not the mainstream media and establishment, who frankly are just trying to smear and label because they're terrified about the progress we're making. And here's the thing, sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. It takes courage to talk about the uncomfortable issues, and sometimes, yes, the truth hurts.
Can I ask you about the comments of Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick talking today about English identity? He says it's under threat. The ties which bind the nation together are beginning to fray, he says, as a result of an influx of migrants and the sneering attitude of the metropolitan elite towards English identity. And some of our viewers emailing in this morning making the point that it sounds straight out of the Reform voters' contract. Are you threatened by Robert Jenrick? Are you threatened by his rhetoric?
No, listen, when people try and copy us, I'm flattered, not threatened. Look, the reality is that Robert Jenrick is terrified by the progress that Reform are making. In the same way that Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, he copied some of our healthcare policy about using more independent healthcare. So look, if people want to copy us, that's great. It shows that actually we've got the right policies, the common sense policies. For example, on my economic policy about the Bank of England stupidly paying voluntary interest on all the printed money, I've now got the Financial Times, I've got the Sunday Times, I've even got Robert Peston agreeing with me that Tice is right. So that's why we're talking common sense. We've got the right economic policies, we've got the right migration policies, and we're telling it as it is on net zero. That is why we're going up in the polls.
Richard, sticking with economics for a moment, the breaking news this morning is that the public debt has hit 100% of GDP, clearly a very negative milestone. Rachel Reeves is absolutely right, isn't she, to stick to her guns and to means test the winter fuel payment and perhaps even raise taxes?
No, she's completely wrong. She's utterly clueless. She won't do what needs to be done. She won't tell the Bank of England not to pay 30 billion of voluntary reserves. They won't scrap net zero that would save 30 billion approximately every single year. That's how you create some growth. That's how you stop raising debt. That's what we've got to do. And look, the winter fuel allowance is an absolute scandal. I've got over 22,200 pensioners losing that winter fuel allowance. Furious. I had a pensioner in Boston just 2 weeks ago literally shake my hand and burst into tears of fear as to whether or not she would see the end of winter because she was worried about being so cold. No, I think this Labour government have got no idea how to create growth, no idea actually how to protect pensioners. They seem to view pensioners as sort of people that they can dismiss, and rather they just want to sort of boost the salaries of already well-paid train drivers and other unionised public sector workers, who frankly, yes, look, everybody wants a pay rise, but guess what? In the world of business, it comes with a requirement for performance-related productivity improvements. None of that from the Labour Party.
Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you very much indeed. We've reached the end of the programme, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for your company. You're back with Anne
I'll be back tomorrow.
6 a.m. And Ben Leo and Nana Aquir are up next with Britain's Newsroom.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A change today for many southern areas with a thunderstorm warning in force. Across the north and west, though, it should remain fairly fine and it will feel warm in any sunshine still. But there's quite a lot of cloud around once again this morning, particularly across eastern areas, northern England, parts of eastern Scotland too, where we could see some drizzly rain. But for most of us across more northern areas, it should stay dry through much of the day. Now, as that cloud does lift and break up for more southern areas, that will allow some thunderstorms and heavy showers to break out. Not everywhere is going to see them. We could see some localised impacts where you do see them. And where we do see the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards the low to mid-20s for many southern areas. A slightly cooler day further north and west, but plenty of fine weather to come through the next couple of days still across northwestern areas. The Highlands and Western Isles seeing the best of any sunshine, temperatures in the mid-teens by the end of the day on Friday. So quite a fine end to the working week. Similar conditions for parts of Northern Ireland, northwestern England, as well as some northern areas of Wales. But further south we go, the risk of thunderstorms continues well into this evening, but there will be a dry interlude just for a time overnight as the thunderstorms clear away to the south and west. But further wet weather is on the way for the early hours of Saturday, and that wet weather will linger through a lot of the weekend for many southern areas. We'll see spells of showers pushing up from the near continent. A lot of cloud coming in from the north and east once again overnight. Clear skies across the northwest could make for a fairly chilly but bright start to the weekend here. So as I said, there's a risk of thunderstorms all the way through the weekend across many southern areas. We'll see pulses of rain. I think most likely the first one through the morning on Saturday morning. May turn a little bit drier across more southern areas into the afternoon, but there's a risk of some surface water, travel disruption and hail and lightning too. But further north and west it will remain largely dry and bright all the way through until Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Antrim, the A26 is closed each way along Frosses Road in Ballymoney after an accident. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is closed in both directions at Hermitage after an accident. On the M6 in Cheshire, there's a lane closed southbound. Someone's broken down between junctions 19 and 18 from Knutsford to the Midwich and Holmes Chapel turn, causing queues. In Nottinghamshire, the A453 is closed each way along Remembrance Way at Clifton in Nottingham after an accident. In Leicestershire, the A563 is closed eastbound for the Red Hill flyover at Belgrave in Leicester after an accident.